The espresso machine hissed like a wounded animal, forcing steam through finely ground Arabica, the scent bitter and bright in the freezing air. Outside, St. Leonard lay buried under a meter of January snow, the kind that muffles sirens and swallows footsteps. But inside Consiglio's, the heat was a physical weight, smelling of sugar, anisette, and the specific, stale tobacco of men who have never known a lungful of clean air. Vito Rizzuto sat in the corner booth, the one with the sightlines to both the front door and the emergency exit through the kitchen. He was 46, though his face, olive skin stretched tight over high cheekbones, eyes the color of the Mediterranean at noon, held a stillness that made age irrelevant. He wore a charcoal Brioni suit, the lapels narrow, the cut severe. A gold Patek Philippe peeked from his cuff. He did not look like a gangster. He looked like a CEO who had decided the boardroom was too small for his ambitions. Across the table, Raymond Ray Deschamps leaned back, the vinyl creaking under his bulk. The president of the Hells Angels Quebec Nomads wore a leather vest over a gray hoodie, the winged death's head patch vivid against the black. His hands, knuckles swollen from a youth in the ring, rested on the table. He spoke Joual, the gutter French of the Montreal streets, but his eyes calculated in pure mathematics. 2.3 tons, Vito, Ray said, his voice a gravel rasp. That's not a shipment. That's a statement. The Colombians don't trust statements. They trust numbers. The numbers are in the container at berth 37, Vito replied. He spoke French, Parisian precise, then switched to English, accentless. Jerry guarantees the dock. Sally guarantees the Calabrian connection, down to Reggio. I guarantee the distribution network from here to Vancouver. The Colombians get paid in washed euros through the Bank of Lebanon. Everyone eats. No one bleeds. Frankie Cotrani, sitting to Vito's left, coughed. A wet, rattling sound. He was 65, ravaged by diabetes, and a decade of watching his family's empire shrink like a dried fig. His suit hung loose on a frame that had once been barrel-chested. Everyone eats, Frankie rasped, his Italian thick with the dialect of Calabria. But who carves the turkey, Vito? You. You weren't even made when I ran the city. The silence stretched, taut as a piano wire. It was the sound of history pressing against the present. Vito didn't flinch. He picked up his demi-tasse, the porcelain thin as eggshell, and inhaled the aroma. You carved the turkey, Frank. You carved it well. But the table has grown. The guests have changed. Now we manage the feast together. Pax Rizzuto. That is the name. A fancy name for a surrender, Salvador Sally Montana murmured. He was the youngest at the table, early 40s, tailored in a way that screamed Milan, not Montreal. His smile didn't reach his eyes, dark, alert, recording everything. He was the Ndrangheta's eyes, and perhaps, though Vito couldn't prove it yet, the Italian prosecutor's ears. Peace is just the pause between wars. My people in Reggio know this. Your people in Reggio, Vito said, setting the cup down with a soft clink, will receive 30% of the gross wholesale revenue. In perpetuity. Provided the product moves without friction. Friction costs money, Sally. War costs blood. I prefer money. Jerry Maddox, the dock king, shifted his weight. He was the oldest power in the room, Irish to the bone, his face a roadmap of broken capillaries and hard decisions. He didn't care about honor codes or Sicilian blood oaths. He cared about throughput. The Port Authority is crawling with RCMP since the Westray inquiry, Jerry said, his voice a low rumble. Berth 37 is clean today. Tomorrow. You need the union boys happy. You need the customs brokers blind. That costs a different kind of capital, Vito. Capital I have, Vito said. Capital I will lend you, Jerry, at 0 interest. Consider it an investment in the infrastructure. The Turcotte interchange reconstruction bids open in March. I have 3 engineers on the evaluation committee. Your grandson's construction firm gets the subcontract for the drainage systems. Clean money washing dirty water, Jerry grunted, a sound of grudging respect. 0 interest. Jesus wept. All right. But if the Mounties kick down my door, I don't know your name. You never knew my name, Vito said. You knew a man who solved a problem. That is all any of us are. He let the silence settle, the agreement solidifying in the steam and the smoke. This was the architecture, not bricks and mortar, but the invisible load-bearing walls of mutual greed and fear. The Pax Rizzuto, a franchise model for Vice. Hell's Angels Muscle, West End Gang Logistics, Cotrany Legacy Contacts, Ndrangheta Supply Lines, Rizzuto Management. A multinational corporation with a death penalty, clause for breach of contract. Sign, Vito said, sliding a single sheet of paper across the table. No contract language. Just 4 lines for initials. A gentleman's agreement written in the only currency that mattered. Trust backed by the capacity for extreme violence. One by one, they signed. Ray Deschamps, his hand shaking slightly. Not fear Parkinson-S, though Vito knew better than to ask. Jerry Maddox, scrawling a jagged G. Frankie Cotrany, his initials trembling, a dying lion marking territory he could no longer defend. Sally Montana, signing with a flourish S. Montana, elegant as a signature on a masterpiece. When it was done, Vito folded the paper, placed it in his breast pocket, over his heart. Espresso for everyone, he called to the owner, old man Consiglio, who had been polishing the same glass for an hour, invisible, omniscient. And a bottle of the 90 Barolo. From my cellar, the loose gallery in Westmount smelled of beeswax, cold concrete, and the sharp, green scent of money. It was a minimalist cube of glass and steel, perched on the edge of the mountain, overlooking the city lights bleeding into the frozen scent. Lawrence. Giulia Rizzuto stood before a massive canvas. Indigenous artist, Norval Morrisseau knockoff, thunderbirds bleeding copper and red. She wore a cashmere coat the color of dried roses, her hair a fall of silver-streaked black silk. At 50, she moved with the economy of a dancer or a spy. Her eyes, dark and fathomless, missed nothing. The couple from the Sûreté du Québec pretending to admire a sculpture in the corner, the young couple arguing quietly about price tags, the reflection of her husband in the glass door as he entered, shaking snow from his shoulders. Vito stepped inside, the cold clinging to him like a second skin. He looked older than he had at Consiglio's, the weight of the piece he had just brokered settling into the lines around his mouth. He carried a wrapped package, long and flat, clumsy in his large hands. "You're late," Giulia said. She didn't turn. Her voice was a contralto, smoky, fluent in the languages of Paris, Milan, and the kitchen in St. Leonard. "The espresso is cold. Business," Vito said. He kissed the air beside her cheek, the ritual gesture. "The kind that keeps the lights on in this palace. Art keeps the lights on, Vito. Business just pays the electrician." She turned finally, her face softening just a fraction. The mask of the gallery director, cool, curated, untouchable, slipped, revealing the girl from Cattolica Eraclea who had married a stranger at 19 and learned to love him in the silences. 25 years. Half a life. More than half, Vito corrected. The best half. He handed her the package. "Open it." Giulia peeled the paper with surgical precision. Beneath lay a charcoal sketch, the paper yellowed at the edges, framed in simple black wood. A single figure, St. Matthew head bowed, an angel whispering in his ear. The light fell in a dramatic slash across the saint's face, chiaroscuro, violent and tender. Caravaggio. Or a study from the master's hand. The brushwork was desperate, divine. Giulia's breath hitched. Her fingers hovered over the glass. A Caravaggio sketch. San Matteo e l'Angelo. The first version. The one the priests rejected because the saint looked too much like a dirty peasant. "Light in darkness, Vito," she whispered, reading the inscription on the back, written in her own handwriting from a letter she'd sent him during his first stint in a Canadian penitentiary, years ago. "That's what you are." The words hung in the air between them, heavier than the gold frame. Vito watched her. He watched the tears well, hot and sudden, spilling over the perfect architecture of her cheekbones. She didn't sob. She didn't make a sound. She simply wept, the tears cutting tracks through the light dust of foundation, the ultimate luxury of a woman who had earned the right to her grief. He moved then, slow, deliberate. He took a handkerchief, linen, monogrammed, from his pocket and dabbed at her face. His thumbs brushed the salt water away. His hands were rough, calloused from the garden he tended at the Chateau in Laval, from the gun he cleaned monthly, from the shovel he had once used in a pine barren in upstate New York. "You are the light, Giulia," he said, his voice a rumble felt in the chest rather than heard. "I am only the architect. I build the walls. You bring the sun inside." She leaned into his palm, her eyes closing. "The walls are high, Vito. And the foundation. It rests on bones. All foundations do," he said. "The difference is, I know where the bones are buried. And I make sure no one else ever finds them." He pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. She smelled of jasmine, expensive perfume, and underneath it, the faint, metallic tang of the espresso she drank by the liter. He held her tight, his arms a cage of protection and possession. And then, silently, his own shoulders shuddered. A single, violent convulsion. A tear, hot as molten lead, traced a path down his weathered cheek, dropping onto the silk of her coat. In the reflection of the gallery glass, the two figures merged into one dark shape against the backdrop of the city lights. The architect and the fortress. The only witnesses to each other's humanity. Brooklyn, May 1981. The social club on Knickerbocker Avenue smelled of cheap cigar smoke, spilled anisette, and the copper penny tang of fear. The fluorescent lights buzzed, a dying insect sound. Vito Rizzuto was 33. He wore a beige suit, wider lapels, hair thick and black. He looked like a waiter who had won the lottery. He sat at a card table with three men: Alphonse, Sunny Red, Indelicato, Dominic Big Trin Trinsera, and Philip Jacone. Capos of the Bonanno family. Rebels. Men who thought the Commission's ruling didn't apply to them, that they could challenge the Rasselli administration, Massino's administration. Joe Massino, Joe Bananas, had sent Vito. "Via faire la pace, Vito. Go make peace." The order was a death warrant wrapped in a handshake. Vito spoke perfect English, perfect Italian, perfect dialect. He poured the anisette. He laughed at their jokes. He ate the capicola sandwiches. He played the peacemaker, the diplomat, the loyal soldier. "Joey Batts sends his regards," Vito said, sliding a key across the table. "A warehouse in Queens. 500 keys of pure white. A gift. To show there are no hard feelings." Sunny Red, fat and sweating, grinning with yellow teeth, reached for the key. "Joey Batts is a stand-up guy. We knew he'd come around." Big Trin, lean and suspicious, watched Vito's hands. "No hard feelings, compare." "You sure?" Vito smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "Business is business, Dominic. Blood is blood. We're all family tonight." The door buzzed. The heavy steel door at the back of the club. Click. Whir. Vito stood up. He moved with a sudden, terrifying grace. His right hand went inside his jacket, not for a wallet. The door opened. 4 men entered. Not waiters. They wore ski masks, carried shotguns and .38s. They moved with the synchronized precision of a SWAT team, or a hit squad trained in the old country. The room didn't erupt. It imploded. Boom. The shotgun took Jacone in the chest, blowing him backward into the card table, chips and cards fluttering like confetti in a hurricane. Crack, crack, crack. The .38 spoke. Sonny Red's head exploded, a red mist painting the peeling wallpaper. Big Trin tried to run, scrambling over a chair, but a slug caught him in the spine. He folded like a cheap suit, twitching on the linoleum. The silence that followed was absolute. The smell of cordite, instantly, overpowered the anisette. Vito stood amidst the carnage, his beige suit pristine. Not a drop of blood on him. The shooters, Montreal men, zips flown in for the job, stood waiting, professional, indifferent. Vito walked to Big Trin. The man was gasping, bubbles of blood foaming at his lips, eyes wide with the betrayal. He reached out a trembling hand, gripping Vito's trouser leg. Figlia. Mia Figlia, my daughter. The whisper was wet, desperate. Please. Vito looked down at the dying capo. He saw the terror, the regret, the sudden, sharp clarity of the end. He saw a reflection of his own father, Niccolo S.R., kneeling in the dust of Sicily, begging for his own life denied. Vito reached into his pocket. Not for a gun. For a wallet. He pulled out a business card, blank on one side, a phone number on the other, and placed it in Big Trin's trembling hand. Tell her father died on his feet, Vito said, his voice soft, almost gentle. Tell her the Rizzutos look after their own. Sempre, he stepped back. The shooters finished the job. 2 shots to the head each. Coup de grace. Professional. Clean. Vito checked his watch. Apodic Philippe, even then. Clean it up, he said to the lead shooter in Sicilian. Leave the card. Burn the car. Be in the air by midnight. He walked out the front door into the bright, harsh Brooklyn sunlight. He didn't run. He didn't look back. He got into a waiting Lincoln Continental and lit a cigarette, his hands perfectly steady. But that night, in a hotel room in Queens, staring at the ceiling, he didn't sleep. He saw Big Trin's eyes. He saw the business card clutched in a dead hand. He heard the whisper, Figlia mia. He had killed 3 men for Joe Massino. He had secured the Bonanno throne for a paranoid tyrant. He had proven he was a wolf among wolves. And he had spared a daughter. It was the only mercy he had ever shown. And it was the sin, the single, solitary crack in the armor, that would hunt him across 2 decades, 2 countries, and the frozen wastes of a Colorado supermax. Because mercy, in this life, was not a virtue. It was a loose thread. And if you pulled it, the whole tapestry unraveled. Montreal, winter 2000. The snow fell thicker now, erasing the tracks on the mountain. Rue Jerry. Vito stood on the balcony of the Chateau Rizzuto in Laval, the fortress behind 12-foot walls. He held a glass of Barolo, the wine dark as arterial blood in the crystal. Below, the grounds were lit by discreet uplighting, revealing manicured gardens, a tennis court, a pool frozen solid. Motion sensors swept the perimeter. Cameras blinked red in the dark. In the basement, a wine cellar held vintages worth more than the GDP of a small island nation. Behind a false wall, an armory held enough hardware to equip a platoon. Inside, Giulia slept in the master suite, the Caravaggio sketch hanging above the headboard now. Nick, 28, MBA gleaming, was in the city, negotiating a condo development on Nuns Island. Leo, 24, was in Milan, sending blueprints of buildings that would never house criminals. Niccolo S.R., 82, was in the guest wing, grumbling about the bikers, the Haitians, the Negri and Zingari polluting the pure blood of the code. He would die in 9 years, shot by a sniper on this very driveway, the old code dying with him. Vito took a sip of wine. He looked at the city spread out below, a jewel box of lights on a black velvet cloth. The port, the highways, the airports, the borders. All veins. All pumping through his heart. He had built a machine that turned poison into gold, gold into concrete, concrete into legitimacy. He had made peace between enemies who had hated each other for generations. He had done it with a handshake, a spreadsheet, and the implicit promise of annihilation for dissenters. Architect of peace. The newspapers would call him that, eventually. The police called him the Teflon Don. The Americans called him a target. Vito touched his chest, where the folded paper with 4 sets of initials rested against his skin. Peace. Pax Resudo. He knew, with the cold certainty of the winter wind biting his face, that it was a lie. Peace was not a structure you built. It was a breath you held. And eventually, inevitably, you had to exhale. He finished the wine. He went inside to his wife, to the light in the darkness, to the only thing that mattered. The snow kept falling, white and indifferent, covering the tracks, covering the bones, waiting for the spring thaw to reveal what the winter had hidden. Chapter 2. The air and the artist. The winter of 2001 settled over Montreal like a shroud, thick and silent, muffling the city's usual clamor beneath meters of driven snow. But inside the glass and steel skeleton of the Le Summit condominium project on Nuns Island, the air hummed with a different kind of cold, the dry, recycled heat of ambition. Niccolo Nick Rizzuto Jr. stood on the 22nd floor, his boots crunching on frozen concrete dust. He was 28, tailored in a charcoal brioni that cost more than the site foreman's annual salary, his hair gelled into a perfect, immobile wave. He didn't look like a mobster's son. He looked like a venture capitalist who had wandered onto a job site by mistake. Which Nick often thought was the entire point. "Pour rate S off on the north face," Nick said, his voice cutting through the whine of a diamond saw. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. The foreman, a beefy Quebecois named Tremblay who had been pouring foundations since the Olympics, froze mid-gesture. "Monsieur Rizzuto, the spec says," Tremblay began, his breath pluming in the sub-zero air. "The spec is a suggestion, Tremblay. The view is the product." Nick tapped the floor-to-ceiling window frame, currently just a gaping maw waiting for glazing. St. Lambert. The mountain. The river. That's what the Asian buyers are wiring 7 figures for. Not the rebar. Fix the slump. Today, Tremblay nodded, the fear in his eyes not of violence but of disappointment. Nick had mastered his father's most terrifying weapon, the quiet expectation of competence. "Good," Nick said, turning on his heel. "And get the Haitian crew off the demo crew and onto the finishing carpentry. They're wasted swinging sledgehammers. Dutch arm nose joinery." "Use him," Tremblay hesitated. "The Hell's Angels. Ray Deschamps. They prefer their own guys on the heavy lift. Union rules, envelope stuffing. Ray and I have an understanding," Nick interrupted, the temperature in the room dropping another degree. "We're building condos, not moving kilos. Tell Ray I said the envelope stays, sealed on this site. We're clean here. Legit. Make sure the workers know it." He walked toward the temporary elevator shaft, the conversation over. Behind him, Tremblay barked orders into a radio, the tone shifting instantly. Nick smiled, a thin, tight expression that didn't reach his eyes. Legit. The word tasted like ash and champagne. It was the holy grail his father chased, the mirage shimmering on the horizon of the Pax Rizzuto. Nick intended to reach it, even if he had to pave the desert with his own bones to do it. He descended to the ground floor, where a portable office trailer sat, heated and smelling of espresso and drywall dust. Inside, hunched over a drafting table lit by a halogen lamp, was Leonardo. Leo was 24, all sharp angles and soft hands, dressed in a cashmere turtleneck and Japanese raw denim. He looked less like a Rizzuto and more like the Milanese architecture student he had been until 6 months ago. His fingers, stained with charcoal and blue ink, moved across a vellum overlay with surgical precision. "Morning, Fredolo," Leo said without looking up. "The glacier melted yet. Spring is a rumor," Nick said, pouring himself a cup from the stainless steel pot on the hot plate. The coffee was thick, bitter ristretto, the only fuel that mattered. "Tremblay, pouring the north face today. I need the balcony load calculations by noon." The glass curtain wall specs changed again. "The engineers in Toronto want thicker mullions." "It kills the sightline," Leo sighed, finally lifting his head. Dark circles bruised the skin beneath eyes the exact shade of Giulia's, deep, ancient brown. "Thicker mullions mean heavier glass. Heavier glass means deeper pilings. Deeper pilings mean we hit the water table. We hit the water table. We're pouring money into the river, Nick." "Literally. Then tell the Toronto engineers to swim," Nick said, sipping the scalding liquid. "Or tell them Vito Rizzuto's son wants the sightline clean." "Pick one," Leo's pencil snapped. The sound was sharp as a gunshot in the quiet trailer. "Father doesn't design buildings, Nick. He designs situations. There's a difference. One obeys physics. The other obeys only him. And right now, physics is negotiable. The sightline sells the dream. The dream pays the mortgage on the dream. Do the math, Leo. Make it work. That's what the MBA was for, no. To make the numbers dance." Leo stared at him, a flash of something raw and wounded crossing his face before the mask settled back into place. The artist's mask, detached, ironic. "I didn't get an MBA, Nick. I got a master, S in beauty." "You're the one who thinks beauty is a line item on a spreadsheet." "Beauty is a line item," Nick corrected gently, clapping a hand on Leo's shoulder. The contact was brief, heavy with the weight of 1,000 unspoken things. "I protect you. I need you. Don't break. Without the line item, you're just a starving artist in a garret. With it, you're the architect of the Rizzuto legacy. Legit legacy. Remember," Leo picked up the broken pencil, tapping the graphite tip against the vellum. "Legit. Right. The magic word. Does Nano know we're using legit Haitian carpenters and legit biker money to build legit condos for Chinese millionaires who may or may not be washing triad cash?" "Nano knows what he's told," Nick said, his jaw tightening. "And he's told that the Turcotte interchange bid rigging is funding the infrastructure, the port fees are covering the carrying costs, and the condos are clean. The separation of church and state, Leo. That's the architecture of peace. Father built the walls. I'm just decorating the rooms. With what?" "Lies. With futures," Nick snapped, the veneer cracking. "Go to the site meeting. Fix the mullions. Be the artist. I'll be the businessman. That's the deal." He left the trailer before Leo could answer, stepping out into the biting wind. The scent. Lawrence froze solid to the horizon, a white desert separating the island from the south shore. Somewhere out there, the containers moved. The money moved. The old life pulsed in the dark arteries of the port. Nick climbed into his armored BMW X5. Discreet, Giulia had insisted, not the Bentley, and drove the 20 minutes north to St. Leonard. Consiglio's espresso bar smelled of roasted beans, anisette, and old secrets. It was the Vatican of the North, a narrow storefront on Jerry Street, where the red vinyl booths had held the weight of more life-and-death decisions than the Quebec National Assembly. Niccolo Rizzuto SR sat in the corner booth, the throne, as the crew called it. At 82, he was a ruin of a man, his spine curved like a question mark, his skin translucent as onion paper over blue-veined hands. But the eyes. The eyes were flint. Black, wet, unblinking. They had ordered the deaths of dozens, perhaps hundreds, and they missed nothing. He sat alone, a single calf corretto with a splash of grappa steaming before him, a folded Corriere Italiano untouched beside it. The younger capos, men with names like Arcuri, Del Balso, Merarchi, orbited at nearby tables, speaking in low dialects, waiting for audience for a nod, for the basio of the hand. Nick entered, the bell above the door chiming. The atmosphere pressure dropped. Conversations didn't stop. They curved, bending around the gravity of the two men. Nick walked straight to the throne. He didn't kiss the ring. He hadn't kissed the ring in 3 years, not since the night he told the old man he was taking a legitimate construction loan from the Case de Depot instead of a vacuum loan from the Calabrian clans. It was a declaration of war disguised as a business decision. Buongiorno, nonno, Nick said, standing rigid, hands clasped behind his back. Niccolo S.R. didn't look up immediately. He lifted the tiny ceramic cup, sipped with agonizing slowness, the grappa burning a path through his ulcerated stomach. He set the cup down. Clink. Nick, the old man rasped, his voice a gravel crusher. You look tired. The legitimate life. It ages a man faster than the other one. At least in the other life, you sleep when the work is done. In your life, the work is never done. Permits. Inspections. Environmental impact studies. He spat the last words like poison. Since when does a Rizzuto ask permission to build on his own land? Since the government owns the zoning, no, Nick replied, his Italian precise, formal. Since the banks own the capital. Since legitimacy requires paperwork. You taught me, adapt or die. I'm adapting, Niccolo S.R.'s head snapped up. The flint struck steel. Adapt. Adatarsi. Is that what you call crawling into bed with the maudits anglais? With the bikers. With the neggers. The slur hung in the air, ugly and ancient, a stone thrown into a still pond. The ambient noise of the cafe, hissing steam wand, clinking spoons, murmured Calabres, didn't even pause. This was the language of the old world. The language of blood and soil. Nick's jaw muscle jumped. A tick, the only tell. Ray Deschamps runs the Nomads. He moves the volume through the port. Jerry Maddox runs the docks. The Haitian crews, Dutcharm, the Seidel brothers, they run the street distribution in Montreal Nord and St. Mitchell. They are partners, Nano. In the packs. Your packs. The peace you blessed in 94. I blessed a peace between men of honor. The old man's voice cracked like a whip, rising above the hiss of the machine. Between Sicilians and Calabrians. Between the Cotroni and the Rizzuto. Not with Modards who wear their colors like whores wear lipstick. Not with street gangs who listen to that jungle music and shoot children by mistake. They don't shoot children by mistake anymore, Nano, Nick said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Because I told them the next mistake costs them their supply line. And their lives. That's management. That's control. That's what you taught me. Control the chaos. Control, the old man laughed, a wet, rattling sound. You think you control them. They control you. Every container you let Ray load, every dollar you wash through Jerry's docks, every Haitian you put on a payroll. You hand them a piece of the throne. And for what? For a condo tower on Nuns Island. For a headline in La Presse saying, Rizzuto goes legit. For a future where my brother doesn't have to carry a gun to go to work. Nick exploded, the dam breaking. For a future where my son, if I ever have one, doesn't grow up knowing his father's phone is tapped. Where Giulia doesn't have to burn shirts in the fireplace. That is what it's for. The old man's hand shot out, gnarled fingers gripping the edge of the table, knuckles white. Giulia. Giulia. Always the wife. The Parisian princess. She fills your head with dreams of respectability. She reads her Vogue, she drinks her Bordeaux, she plays at art in her little gallery. And the empire rots from the inside. Leave her out of this, Nick warned, a hand drifting instinctively to his waistband beneath the Brioni jacket. I built this. The old man screamed now, drawing stares from the waitress behind the counter, though the capos at the other tables remained studiously focused on their espresso. I came from Cattolica Heraclea with nothing. I carved this city out of ice and rock with my bare hands. I buried friends. I buried enemies. I buried your brother. He paused, the rage curdling into something deeper, older. Pietro. My firstborn. Killed in '88. For honor. For the code. And now his grandson sells the code for a view of the mountain. The mention of Pietro, the uncle Nick had never met, the ghost at every feast, struck deeper than the slurs. Nick's hand fell away from his waist. The fight drained out of him, replaced by a cold, hollow resolve. The code didn't save Pietro Nano, Nick said quietly. The code didn't save Zio Paolo. The code is a graveyard. I'm trying to build a house on top of it. With windows. And light, Niccolo SR. Slumped back, the sudden expenditure of energy leaving him gasping, his chest heaving beneath the wool cardigan. He looked suddenly small, ancient, a relic of a Cretaceous era. He picked up his spoon, stirring the dregs of his coffee with mechanical persistence. Light, the old man muttered, staring into the dark liquid. There is no light in this life, Niccolo. Only shadows. And the shadows are getting longer. You think the Ndrangheta in Ontario respect your condos. You think the Bananos in New York care about your legitimate tax returns. Joe Massino. He sees a cash machine. He doesn't see a partner. He sees a vassal who forgot his place. Massino gets his tribute, Nick said, the architect's mask sliding back into place, cold and perfect. On time. Every month. The rest is noise. Noise, the old man repeated. Yes. The noise of the executioner's footsteps. You hear them, figlio mia. I do. They walk on the floors you're pouring. Tick. Tock. He dismissed him with a flick of the wrist, turning his back, staring out the frosted window at the snow-blind street. Nick didn't bow. He didn't kiss the hand. He turned and walked out of Consiglio's, the bell chiming a final, mocking note. The cold air hit his face like a slap, cleansing, clarifying. He breathed deep, tasting exhaust and ice. Tick. Tock. He got in the BMW and drove west, up the mountain, toward Westmount. The gallery, loose, occupied a renovated Victorian greystone on Sherbrooke Street, its facade stripped of ornament, reduced to clean lines and expansive glass, a manifesto in brick and mortar. Inside, the air was scrubbed clean of the city's grime, scented with white lilies and the faint, chemical tang of conservation fluids. Giulia Rizzuto stood before a massive canvas by a Cree artist, Kent Monkman, the subversive grandeur of the scream holding her gaze. She wore a cream-colored cashmere coat, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in a low chignon, a single strand of pearls at her throat. She looked, as always, like a woman who had never known a moment of fear, only the careful curation of beauty. She didn't turn when the bell chimed. She knew the rhythm of his steps. The heavy, purposeful tread of Nick. The lighter, dragging shuffle of Leo. The silent, predatory glide of Vito. Today, the steps were light. Hesitant. Wrong. She turned. Salvador, Sally Montana stood in the doorway. He was 40, sculpted like a Michelangelo's David but softened by luxury. Brioni suit, Hermes tie, a watch that cost more than the Monkman. His hair was dark, swept back. His smile was a weapon calibrated for maximum charm. He was the Ndrangheta's smiling ambassador, the liaison from Reggio Calabria, who had wormed his way into the Pax Rizzuto with bottles of 90 Barolo and promises of Calabrian loyalty. "Signora Rizzuto," he said, his Italian melodic Neapolitan vowels softened by a Parisian education. "You are radiant. The light in here. It suits you. Luce. Perfect name." Giulia inclined her head, the temperature in the room dropping to match the gallery's climate control. "Salvator, I didn't expect you until the charity gala tomorrow. The Children's Hospital benefit. Ah, the gala." He waved a dismissive hand, stepping deeper into the space, his eyes scanning not the art but her. "Obligatory torture. Rubber chicken. Smug politicians. I came today for a private viewing. I heard you acquired the new Sarah sculpture." Torqued ellipse. "Steel. Heavy. Dangerous. Like the men you love. We don't have the Sarah yet. Customs is holding it at the port." Her voice was flat, devoid of flirtation. "Paperwork. Jerry Maddox assures me it clears by Friday." "Jerry," Sally mused, stopping before a vitrine containing a 17th-century Sicilian ceramic testa di Maro, a Moor's head, glazed in vibrant blues and yellows, ugly and beautiful. "Jerry is a relic. A dinosaur waiting for the meteor. The docks. They are changing. The world is changing. Containerization. Automation. The Ndrangheta has ports in Gioia Tauro, in Rotterdam. We move the future, Giulia. Not the past. I prefer the past," she said. "It stays still long enough to be framed." He turned, leaning against the vitrine, crossing his legs at the ankle. "Is that why you stay? For the frames? For the silence? I watch you, you know. At the galas. At the charity boards. You move through the room like a ghost in a ballroom. Everyone sees you. No one knows you. Not even him. Especially not him." Giulia's eyes flicked to the reception desk, where her assistant, a young Inuit woman named Aju, sat typing. Aju's head was down, but her ears were radar. Giulia shifted her weight imperceptibly, a signal. "Stay." "Witness." "And you, Salvator?" Giulia asked, stepping closer, invading his space with the terrifying intimacy of a surgeon. "Do you know me? Or do you only know the file your handlers in Reggio built? The one with the photos of me buying groceries at Provigo. The one with the telephoto shots of me weeping at Nick's graduation. The one where you circled my face in red marker." Sally's smile didn't falter. It hardened, becoming something lethal. "I know you're the daughter of Don Carmine Carbone, the Ndrangheta royalty. I know you were raised in the Omerta, but educated at the Sorbonne. I know you chose this life, Vito, Montreal, the snow, over the sun of Calabria. That takes a specific kind of courage. Or madness. It takes love," she corrected. "A concept your reports likely file under vulnerability. Vulnerability is leverage," he said softly. "Or opportunity. Depending on who holds the lens." He reached into his inner pocket. Giulia didn't flinch. Her hand rested on the pearl handle of the letter opener on the desk behind her, a silver antique, sharp enough to open an artery. He withdrew not a gun, but a sleek, matte black tablet. He swiped the screen, turned it toward her. It was a live feed. Or near live. High resolution. Timestamped 3 hours ago. The Chateau Rizzuto. The Laval Fortress. The screen showed the circular driveway. The front doors opening. Vito Rizzuto stepping out. He wore a dark overcoat, a cashmere scarf wrapped precisely. He looked older than his 54 years, the weight of the empire settling into the lines around his mouth. He was not alone. Beside him walked a woman. Not Giulia. Tall. Blonde. I scold beauty in a mink coat. Elena Rossi. Agent Elena Rossi. RCMP. Integrated Organized Crime. They walked toward the helipad on the lower terrace. A black Bell 429 sat waiting, rotors turning slow. They boarded. The doors closed. The rotors accelerated, biting the air. The image froze on the helicopter lifting off, rising into the gray-white sky, disappearing over the tree line of the Bois de l'Isle Bizard Nature Preserve. Surveillance is such a crude word, Sally said, his voice a silk wrapper around a razor. I prefer curated intelligence. Your husband meets with the Poliziotto weekly. Sometimes in the helipad. Sometimes in the wine cellar. Sometimes in her apartment on the plateau. The RCMP thinks she's turning him. Massino's lawyers think she's the key to the RICO case. I think he tapped the screen, zooming on the frozen frame of Alina's face, her hand resting on Vito's forearm. I think she's the only woman in Montreal who knows the exact dimensions of his cage. And he lets her measure it. Giulia stared at the screen. The silence stretched, filled only by the hum of the climate control. She did not gasp. She did not weep. She did not reach for the letter opener. She studied the pixels, the angle of Vito's head, the tension in his shoulders, the way Alina's fingers brushed his sleeve, a touch brief, professional, necessary. He's feeding her, Giulia thought, the realization cold and clear as the Montreal air. He's feeding her scraps to keep the wolves from the door. He's using her ambition, her obsession with the 81 murders, her brother's ghost. He's architecting her investigation into a controlled burn. And the woman in the mink. She's not the threat. She's the tool. Giulia looked up, her eyes meeting Sally's. She let the mask drop. Just for a second. Just long enough for him to see the abyss behind the curator's gaze. The calculation. The ruthlessness that ran deeper than blood, older than the code. I see you seeing me, her eyes said. And I see him seeing you. Checkmate. She's persistent, Giulia said, her voice light, conversational. Elena. She believes she can save us. Or destroy us. She doesn't understand. We are the weather. She is just the forecast. Poetic, Sally murmured, pocketing the tablet. But forecasts save lives, Signora. Or end them. The Americans are pressing. Massino is singing. The extradition request is being drafted in Washington as we speak. Vito knows this. He's preparing. Vito is always preparing, Giulia said. She walked to the Monkman painting, touching the frame with reverence. He prepares for winter by cutting wood in July. He prepares for betrayal by loving the traitor first. He prepares for death by building things that outlive him. This gallery. The condos. The peace. Us. She turned back to him, the fortress rebuilt, the drawbridge raised. Tell your bosses in Reggio, she said, that the Rizzuto family is not for sale. Not for a port in Giuliataro. Not for a helicopter ride. Not for a tablet full of stolen moments. If they want war, they will get a winter they never imagined. If they want peace, the terms remain the same. The pax holds. The tribute flows. The borders are respected. She smiled then, a genuine, terrifying thing, all teeth and ice. And Salvador, she added, next time you want to show me my husband's sins, bring better resolution. The lighting on that feed was atrocious. It made Alina look washed out. And Vito never looks washed out. He looks like he's carrying the world. Because he is. Sally stared at her, the predator recognizing the apex predator. The charm vanished, replaced by a cold, professional respect. He nodded, a sharp military gesture. Duly noted, Signora. The resolution will be improved. Arrivederci, he left. The bell chimed. The silence rushed back in, heavy and absolute. Giulia exhaled, a long, slow breath that fogged the air for a fraction of a second. Her hand trembled once violently, where it rested on the frame. Then it stilled. She reached into her pocket, withdrew a compact, solid gold, engraved with the Rizzuto crest, and checked her lipstick. Perfect. Carmine. The color of blood. The color of power. She snapped it shut. Walked to the desk. Aju, she said, her voice crisp, professional. Cancel my 3 o'clock. Call Nick. Tell him the Mullion issue is resolved. Tell him to trust the artist. And, she paused, looking out the window at the mountain, crowned in snow. Send a case of the 90 Barolo to the plateau. Apartment 4B. With a note. For the witness. The vintage is exceptional. Drink it slow. She picked up her leather tote, turned off the gallery lights. The monkmen disappeared into darkness. The Sicilian ceramic heads stared blindly into the void. Outside, the wind howled down Sherbrooke, rattling the glass. The red winter was coming. But tonight, the architect's wife walked to her armored sedan with the stride of a queen inspecting her battlements. Already 3 moves ahead on a board, the men hadn't even realized they were playing on. Chapter 3. The container the April rain didn't wash Montreal clean. It just made the grime slicker, turning the gray sludge of the port into a mirror for the halogen floods. Berth 37 smelled of diesel, brine, and the sweet, metallic tang of rusted steel, smells that usually signaled commerce, the lifeblood of the city. Tonight, they signaled a hemorrhage. Vito Rizzuto stood in the shadow of a straddle carrier, the massive machine idling like a sleeping beast, its exhaust pluming into the wet air. He wore a charcoal Brioni coat, the collar turned up against the damp chill, leather gloves soft as skin. He didn't look like a man who had just authorized the movement of 2,300 kilograms of Peruvian flake. He looked like a man inspecting a shipment of ceramic tile, or perhaps high-end espresso machines. That was the architecture of it, the legitimate veneer, the plausible deniability built into the very blueprints of the operation. Beside him, Gerald Jerry, Maddox shifted his weight, the creak of his knees audible even over the port din. The Dock King was a mountain of a man, his face a topographical map of broken capillaries and old grudges, framed by a gray beard trimmed tight against the wind. He wore a Carhartt jacket that had seen better decades and a union pin on his lapel the size of a silver dollar. 2.3, Jerry muttered, his voice a gravel grinder. Largest pinch in the Dominion's history, they're saying on the radio. Radio Canada had a chopper up before the Mounties even cut the padlock. Vito didn't flinch. His eyes tracked the motion of the RCMP tactical team. Green uniforms, black Kevlar, dogs straining at leashes, swarming the MSC Valeria like ants on a dropped sugar cube. The container, a nondescript 40-foot Corten steel box marked Mediterranean ceramics, Bari to Montreal, sat tilted on a chassis, its doors yawning open to reveal not tiles, but shrink-wrapped bricks stacked with geometric precision, each stamped with a black scorpion logo. La Scorpion. A signature. A brand. A death warrant. The Scorpion, Vito said, his voice pitched low, meant only for Jerry's ears. A touch of theater, Jerry. Whose idea? Jerry spat a wad of tobacco juice onto the wet asphalt. Sally S. The Calabrian peacock. Said it stood for strength in the tail. I told him it stood for stupidity in the brain. Customs has a database for logos now, Vito. They scan the brick. They know the clan before they weigh the kilo. Salvador Montana has the ego of a Caesar and the discretion of a toddler, Vito said. But he moves volume. He moves it through Calabria, through Gioia Toro, into the Med. We needed the pipeline. The pipeline just burst, Jerry said. He gestured with a thick finger toward the knot of activity. My guys on the crane. Gone. The truckers. Gone. The manifest. Burned. But the traffic, Vito, the phone traffic. The wiretaps. Vito's gloved hand tightened almost imperceptibly on the rail of the carrier. The wiretaps. Project Colossae, Jerry whispered the name like a curse. They've been listening since January. The judge signed the renewal 3 weeks ago. They have you, Vito. They have your voice on the line with Massino. They have you authorizing the Valeria's birth window. Birth 37, Joe. Midnight. Make sure the Scorpion sleeps. Those were your words. The rain intensified, hammering the steel roof of the container. Vito breathed in, slow and deep, tasting ozone and corruption. 30 years of building. The Pax Risuto. The Hells Angels handling the street distribution. The West End gang controlling the dock. The Ndrangheta sourcing the product. The Cotrony remnants kept fat and quiet on construction kickbacks. A United Nations of crime, held together by Vito's singular vision. Volume without violence. Profit without profile. And Salvador, Montana, had put a Scorpion on the bricks. Ray, Vito asked. Car bomb, Jerry said. Rue Sherbrooke, 2 hours ago. Nomad's clubhouse run. Ray's caddy took the blast. He's at the Royal Vic, picking glass out of his face. Concussion, broken ribs. His bodyguard, Pierre, pink mist. Ray's lucky. Or unlucky, depending on how you see the prison sentence coming down the pipe. Vito closed his eyes. Ray Deschamps. The Velvet Hammer. The only man who could make a Hell's Angel look like a venture capitalist. The alliance with the Nomads was the keystone of the northern distribution. If Ray fell, the bikers would fracture, war would erupt on the streets, and the delicate architecture would collapse into rubble. Did the bomb have a signature? Vito asked. Remote detonator. Sophisticated. Not biker work. Not street work. Professional. Military grade, maybe. Or just other work, other work. The phrase hung in the salt air. The Americans. The Colombians cleaning house. Or the Calabrians cutting the throat of the Sicilian golden goose. Sally Montana's face flashed in Vito's mind. Handsome, charming, those dead shark eyes. He had been at the gallery opening last month, staring at Giulia's Caravaggio sketch with an intensity that had nothing to do with art. Get to the hospital, Vito said, turning away from the seizure. Stay with Ray. Make sure the Nomads don't retaliate blind. I want a lockdown on the East End. No shots fired without my say-so. You hear me, Jerry? No shots. And the shipment, Jerry called after him as Vito walked toward the blacked-out Mercedes S-Class idling by the perimeter fence. The 2-3. The cash flow. Vito paused, his hand on the door handle. The shipment is gone, Jerry. The cash flow is frozen. We survive on reserves. We survive on legitimacy. The condos in Laval, the Turcut contracts, the gallery. We become what we pretend to be. Businessmen. He slipped into the leather embrace of the car. The door thunked shut, sealing out the noise, the rain, the smell of the river. The interior smelled of Giulia's jasmine perfume, old paper, and the faint, ghostly residue of espresso. His driver, a quiet man named Enzo, pulled away smoothly, tires hissing on the wet pavement. They left the port behind, climbing the slope toward the autoroute, the lights of the city bleeding into the low clouds. Orange sodium, cold white LED, the red eyes of braking cars. Vito pulled his encrypted BlackBerry from his pocket. The red light blinked. A text from a number saved only as Bronx. Heat is nuclear. Stop. Indictment sealed SDNY. Stop. Rico 1981 3 capos. Stop. MASSINO flipping. Stop. You are on your own. Stop. JB. Vito stared at the screen. The glow illuminated the fine lines around his eyes, the silver at his temples. He read it 3 times. The words didn't blur. They didn't surprise him. He had known this day was coming since the night in 1981, when the silencer coughed 3 times in a Brooklyn social club, and the blood pooled on the sawdust floor. 3 capos. Indelicato. Trinchera. Jacalone. He had done it for Joe Massino. For the Bonanno family. For the commission. He had been the sword, the clean, sharp instrument. And now the sheath was rotting. Massino, the last Don, the man who banned the maid guys from wearing wires, was wearing the ultimate wire. He was singing aria to the FBI to save his own neck from the needle. You are on your own. The car turned onto the Autoroute 13 North, heading for Laval, for the fortress. The Chateau Rizzuto loomed ahead, a monolith of stone and glass behind 12-foot walls, motion sensors, and cameras that saw in infrared. A palace built on the proceeds of heroin, cement, and silence. Vito typed a reply with his thumb, the motion economical. Understood. Stop. Initiating Protocol Gray. Stop. VR. He pocketed the phone. His hands were steady. They were always steady. But inside, in the cavern behind the ribs where he kept Giulia, Nick, Leo, and the ghost of his father, a cold wind was blowing. The Chateau was quiet when he entered. Too quiet. The staff, Maria the housekeeper, the 2 security men in the basement war room, moved like ghosts on felt slippers. They knew. They always knew before the news broke. He found Giulia in the East Wing studio. The room smelled of linseed oil, turpentine, and the sharp green scent of the ficus she nursed by the floor-to-ceiling windows. She stood before a large canvas, a palette knife in her hand, scraping away layers of impasto, deep indigo, burnt umber, a slash of violent crimson. She was destroying a painting. Or perhaps revealing the one underneath. She wore a cashmere sweater the color of wet sand, her hair pulled back in a simple clip. No jewelry. No makeup. At 48, she possessed a beauty that had nothing to do with youth. It was the beauty of forged steel, tempered by decades of secrets kept and lines held. She didn't turn when the heavy door clicked shut. The scorpion, she said, her voice calm, devoid of inflection. Sally's vanity. I told you 3 years ago he would be the worm in the apple. Vito crossed the room, stopping beside her. He smelled the rain on his coat, the port on his gloves. The apple is rotten, amore. The whole orchard, Jerry, arrested. They're processing him at the RCMP detachment on Rue Saint-Anton. He'll be bilayed by morning. Maddox's money is deep, but the dock is frozen. The West End gang is headless, and Ray, hospital. He lives. His driver does not. Giulia finally turned. Her eyes, the color of the Mediterranean at depth, held no tears. They held calculation. She wiped a smear of indigo from her fingers onto a rag. The car bombing. That wasn't the Mounties. No. It was a message. Or a cleanup. From New York! She stepped closer, invading his space, her hand rising to rest flat against his chest, feeling the heartbeat beneath the brioni. The text. I saw the light on your face in the hall. Massino. Vito covered her hand with his own, the leather glove rough against her soft skin. He flipped Giulia. Joe Bananas sang. The FBI has the 1981 tapes. They have the RICO indictment sealed in the Southern District. They want me in a supermax in Colorado for the rest of my life. The silence stretched, filled only by the hum of the climate control and the distant patter of rain on the glass. Giulia's fingers curled into the fabric of his coat. Extradition, imminent. The Minister of Justice will sign. The Americans have the evidence. Massino's testimony. The wiretaps from Colisée, corroborating the 1981 motive. It's a perfect storm. She nodded once, a sharp, decisive movement. Then, we don't wait for the storm to break the windows. We open the door. Vito frowned. Giulia. If I fight extradition in Canadian court, it buys time. Years, maybe. But the U.S. Marshals will be waiting at the border the second I walk free. If I stay here, the RCMP will arrest me on the Colisée charges. Conspiracy, trafficking, criminal organization. 5, maybe 7 years in a Canadian pen. Medium security. Weekends at home. Conjugal visits. You. The boys, and the Americans, she pressed. They don't forget. They don't do time served. They will wait, Vito said. But if I surrender to the Canadian charges now, voluntarily, I control the narrative. I enter the system on my terms. I avoid the perp walk in chains across the Lacal border. I keep the fortress intact for Nick. For Leo. For you. He removed his glove, letting it fall to the studio floor, and cupped her face, his bare palm warm against her cheek. I'll be home for espresso, Bambina. I promise. 2 years. Maybe 3. I'll run the empire from the range. You run the street. Nick runs the boardroom. We survive this. We always survive. Giulia leaned into his touch, her eyelids fluttering shut for a fraction of a second, the only crack in the fortress wall. You swore to me on the steps of Santa Maria Madonna in 1979. Never a night apart unless God takes us. You swore it on the host. And I keep it, Vito whispered, his thumb tracing the arch of her cheekbone. I'm not leaving you. I am positioning the pieces. The king moves 1 square. The queen holds the board. A sharp chime echoed through the house. The front door alarm. Heavy footsteps on the marble foyer. Not Enzo. Not the staff. Boots. Tactical boots. Vito's head snapped toward the door. His hand dropped from Giulia's face, falling to his side. His posture didn't change, shoulders back, chin level, but the air around him shifted, ionizing with a lethal stillness. The architect was gone. The dawn remained. Stay here, he murmured. Vito, stay. In the studio. Door locked. Panic room if they breached the hall. She didn't argue. She didn't plead. She simply nodded, reached into the pocket of her sweater, and pressed a small, flat button sewn into the seam. A silent alarm. The steel shutters on the studio windows began their slow, humming descent. Vito moved through the east corridor, silent on the Italian marble. He passed the security station in the basement. The 2 men, ex-Canadian Special Forces, loyal, expensive, were already on their knees, hands zip-tied behind their backs. RCMP emergency response team operators in black kit, faces masked, MP5s leveled, filled the war room. The monitors showing the perimeter feeds had been ripped out. Cables dangled like severed nerves. He didn't reach for the Glock 19 taped beneath the desk. He didn't run for the tunnel exit behind the wine rack. He stood in the doorway, the light from the hall framing him, and waited. Superintendent Jack Durocher stepped forward. A big man, thick-necked, with the weary eyes of a copper who had seen too many bodies pulled from the scent. Lawrence. He wore a windbreaker with police in yellow block letters. He held a warrant folder in one hand, a pair of handcuffs in the other. Vito Rizzuto, Durocher said, his French accented with the joie of the East End. You're under arrest for conspiracy to import narcotics, conspiracy to traffic, and participation in a criminal organization. Project Colisée. Vito looked at the handcuffs. then at Duracher's face. Jack, you're tracking mud on the Italian marble. My wife just had it polished. Save the charm for the judge, Vito. We have a wiretap of you, authorizing the Valeria shipment. We have Jerry Maddox in custody singing like a canary to save his grandkids' trust fund. We have the Scorpion bricks. It's over. Jerry doesn't sing, Vito said. He hums. And the Scorpion, that was a mistake. A subordinate's vanity. Mistakes are what put guys like you away, Duracher said. He signaled 2 officers. Turn around. Hands behind your back, Vito complied. Slowly. Deliberately. He turned, presenting his wrists. The cold steel clicked shut. Not tight. Professional respect. As the officers gripped his arms to guide him toward the stairs, the studio door at the end of the hall swung open. Giulia stood there. The shutters were half down, casting her in stripes of light and shadow. She held a small silver tray. On it sat 2 demitasse cups, a silver spoon, and a steaming mocha pot. Vito, she called out. Her voice carried no tremor. The espresso is ready. You said you'd be home for it. Vito stopped. The officers paused, looking at the superintendent. Duracher hesitated, the warrant folder loose in his grip. Vito turned his head, just enough to catch her eye across the 20 feet of polished stone. The distance was an abyss. The handcuffs were a chain. The indictment was a tombstone. But the espresso was a promise. He smiled. It was a small thing, a crinkling at the corners of his eyes, a flash of white teeth. A reward for her courage. Black, no sugar, he said. Just the way I like it. Save me a cup, amore. I'll be home for the second one. He let them lead him up the stairs, out the front doors, into the flashing blue and red chaos of the RCMP convoy waiting in the circular driveway. The rain had stopped. The clouds were breaking, revealing a sliver of pale, watery moon. He was placed in the back of an unmarked Crown Victoria. The door slammed. The engine turned over. As the car pulled away, tires crunching on the gravel, Vito watched the shadehouse shrink in the rearview mirror. He saw the second-floor window, the studio. The shutters were fully closed now. But behind the glass, he knew, a single light burned. A beacon. A lighthouse in the coming storm. He leaned back against the vinyl seat, the handcuffs chafing slightly. He closed his eyes and saw the Scorpion bricks, the Brooklyn Social Club, the Caravaggio sketch, Giulia's face. The list, he thought, the first entry forming in the cold, hard ledger of his mind. Messina. Montana. Cotrani. The sniper. The traitors. All of them. He exhaled, a long, slow breath that fogged the partition window. Drive on, he said to the partition. I have a sentence to serve. And then I have a reckoning to build. The car merged onto the autoroute, heading south. Toward the border. Toward the Americans. Toward the dark. Chapter 4, the coffee at Collins Bay was, against all thermodynamic logic, drinkable. Vito Rizzuto sat at a steel table, bolted to the linoleum floor of the visiting room, a plastic tray before him. Steam curled from the brown liquid, carrying the scent of burnt rubber and dark fruit. He didn't drink it immediately. He watched the steam rise, a tiny, fleeting geometry in air that smelled of floor wax, boredom, and the sour, metallic tang of suppressed violence. 2 years. 730 mornings of counting the locks clicking shut behind him. 730 nights of the fluorescent hum above his bunk, a sound like a trapped fly beating against a window pane. Comfortable. That was the word the newspapers used. Club-fed. The journalists from La Presse and the Gazette had never spent a winter in a cell where the heating failed for 3 days, or listened to a man choke on his own blood in the infirmary, because the guard on duty was finishing a crossword puzzle. But compared to what waited south of the 45th parallel, Collins Bay was a sanatorium. He had a private cell, earned, not given, the respect of the warden purchased with the same currency that bought judges in Montreal: silence and order. He had books. He had a garden plot where he grew tomatoes that tasted of ash and clay. And he had the visits. Every Tuesday. 10 a.m. Sharp. The double doors buzzed. The heavy mesh gate slid aside with a sound like a tombstone dragged over gravel. Giulia entered. She wore a coat the color of wet slate, cashmere, collar turned up against the Kingston wind that whistled through the sally port. Her hair, the color of chestnut hulls, was pinned simply. No jewelry except the wedding band, platinum, inscribed per sempre inside a groove worn smooth by 40 years of her thumb tracing it. She carried no purse. She never did. Her hands were free, folded at her waist, the posture of a queen entering a hostile court. She was 52. The lines around her eyes had deepened, etching maps of worries he couldn't carry for her. But her spine was rigid. Her gait was the glide of a ship cutting pack ice. Vito stood. The chair scraped a shriek against the floor. The two guards, local hires, board, unionized, stiffened. Procedure: no embracing until seated. No passing of items. Hands visible always. He walked to her. The air displaced by his movement carried the scent of his laundry soap, industrial, harsh, and beneath it, the ghost of the tomato plants. Earth. Growth. Life. He stopped a foot from her. The plexiglass barrier was for the contact visits, reserved for the well-behaved and the dying. They were allowed the open table today. A privilege. Buongiorno, mogli mia, he said. His voice was a low cello note, resonant in the institutional hush. Buongiorno, Vito. Her voice was lighter, a flute. She didn't smile. They didn't smile for the cameras tucked in the corners, their lenses blinking like lazy eyes. The tomatoes, dead. The blight took them in July. I've started cabbages. They survived the frost. Cabbages. Practical. Ugly. Like this place, nutritious. That is the only metric that matters here, she sat. He sat. The plastic tray between them was a demilitarized zone. How is the gallery? He asked. Loose. Light. Her sanctuary in Westmont. Quiet. The indigenous show sold well. The ceramics less so. People want abstraction now. They don't want to hold the mud. She leaned forward, elbows on the table, hands clasped. The shift was imperceptible, a tightening of the tendons in her wrists. The docs are quiet too. Jerry is. Anxious. His grandson was picked up for possession in Toronto. Small amount. A message. Vito stirred his coffee. A plastic stir stick. He moved it clockwise, watching the liquid vortex. Jerry worries about trust funds. He forgets the docs run on fear, not love. Tell him the next container arrives Thursday. Berth 37. The manifests are clean. The customs officer in Halifax, McIntyre, his daughter's tuition at McGill is paid for the year. He sees nothing. Sally Montana knows about Thursday. The stir stick stopped. The coffee stilled. Does he? He came to the gallery. Monday. Brought a bottle of Barolo. 1996. Giacosa. He knows I don't drink red at noon. He drank half the bottle himself. Vito's eyes, the color of the Mediterranean at depth, held hers. No flicker. No surprise. Sally Montana. The wolf. The Endrang had a liaison with the face of a Renaissance angel and the soul of a tax auditor. Handsome, charming, recording every breath for prosecutors in Reggio Calabria, or so the RCMP file said. Vito's intelligence said he was recording for himself, building a ledger to buy a plaza. And Nick, Vito asked. The stir stick snapped between his fingers. A small violence. Nick is Nick, Giulia's voice flattened. He pushes the condo development in Griffintown. He argues with his grandfather about the Haitian cruise. He thinks he is building a legacy. He doesn't see the crosshairs. Nano is 84. He sees crosshairs in his soup. Nano sees the code. He sees you partnering with bikers and niggers. His words, not mine, and he sees the bloodline diluting. He humiliates Nick at the Sunday table. Nick swallows it. He swallows everything. That is what frightens me. Vito pocketed the broken plastic. He swallows because he is learning to breathe underwater. It is the only way to survive the depth. And Leo designs the condos Nick sells. He sketches in the studio above the gallery. He met a girl, a cop's daughter, Maria Consolini. She is pregnant. The coffee went cold in the cup. Vito did not flinch. He had known before she spoke. The letters smuggled out in the spines of legal briefs, privileged communication, do not open, carried more than Dante translations. They carried the pulse of the empire. A cop's daughter, Vito repeated. Dante would place them in the 8th circle. Fraud. Or perhaps the first. Limbo. The virtuous pagans. She is not virtuous, Vito. She is real. She loves him. She forces him to choose. He is shaking. He comes to me at night. He cries in the kitchen while I pack the ceramics. He says he doesn't want the gun. He wants the blueprint, then he must draw fast. The blueprint requires the gun to hold the paper down. Giulia reached across the table. Her fingers, cool and dry, covered his knuckles. The guards shifted. A camera word, zooming. You are the architect, she whispered, fierce and low. You drew the lines. You made the piece. But the ground is shaking. Sally Montana is not just watching the gallery. He is watching me. He offered. He implied. Protection for Nick. Explicitly. In exchange for, she stopped. The cashmere sleeve brushed the plastic tray. For access. To me. To the books. To the laundry. Vito turned his hand over, trapping hers. His palm was rough, calloused from the garden trowel, the weightlifting bar, the thousands of hands shaken in a lifetime of contracts. What did you tell him? I told him to finish his wine. I told him the gallery shows art, not ledgers. I told him if he threatened my son again, I would carve his heart out with the letter opener on my desk and mail it to his mother in Calabria. A ghost of a smile touched Vito's lips. It didn't reach his eyes. My Giulia. The Caravaggio sketch. Light and darkness. I am tired, Vito. 2 years of being the Don in heels. 2 years of Ray Deschamps laughing in my office because he thinks a woman cannot count kilos. 2 years of Jerry Maddox crying into his whiskey about his grandson while his lieutenants skim the top. 2 years of Nano spitting on the floor when I served the espresso. Her thumb stroked the back of his hand. I am tired of the silence. The letters you send, poetry and strategy. They are not enough. I need you here. Soon, he said. The word was a promise wrapped in a lie. The Canadian sentence is 5 years. Minus time served. Minus good behavior. 18 months. Then a halfway house. Then home. Massino flipped. The words fell into the hum of the ventilation system. Joe Bananas. The Bronx boss. The nominal superior. The man for whom Vito had butchered 3 capos in a Brooklyn social club in 1981. The sin etched into his marrow. I know. The Americans filed the RICO. The 3 capos murders. Bob Anderson, the Fed, he has the indictment ready. He's been waiting 25 years. The extradition hearing is next month. The Minister of Justice. He signals compliance. The politics demand it. Harper wants to look tough on crime. The border is opening for you, Vito. Not to come home. To go there, Vito withdrew his hand. He picked up the cold coffee. Drank it in one swallow. The bitterness bloomed on his tongue, familiar as communion. ADX Florence, he said softly. The Alcatraz of the Rockies. 23-hour lockdown. 7 by 12. No garden. No tomatoes. No visits with Cashmere and Barolo. Vito, her voice cracked. The fortress trembled. You cannot go there. You will die there. You are 58. Your lungs. The dust from the construction sites. I have lived on borrowed breath since 1981. Since the night I put 3 men in the ground for a man who just sold me for a witness protection deal and a mattress in a federal witness pod. He looked at the guards. They were pretending not to listen. He looked at the camera. Ciao, Bob. You win the round. The hearing is May 12th. The decision is a formality. The treaty is ironclad. Then we prepare for the winter. The letter arrived 3 weeks later. It came inside a hollowed-out paperback copy of the Divine Comedy. Purgatorio, passed from the prison librarian, a lifer named Gus who ran the library like a fiefdom, to Vito during the Tuesday exchange. No postmark. No stamp. The scent hit him before he opened the pages. Jasmine. Gelsomino. Giulia's garden in Laval. Pressed petals tucked into Canto V. He read it in his cell that night, the thin blanket pulled over his head, a contraband penlight beam slicing the dark. Vito, I did it. Tuesday. At the gallery. After he left the Barolo. He came back. He said the deal for Nick's safety required a signature in blood. Not metaphor. He locked the door. He has men outside, Calabrians, not bikers. He said if I screamed, Nick dies in his car on the 40 by morning. A sniper. He showed me the photo. The red dot on Nick's temple. I let him touch me. I let him take what he wanted. It lasted 9 minutes. I counted the strokes of the second hand on the clock above the Frida Kahlo print. 9 minutes. I did not close my eyes. I memorized the pores on his nose. The scar on his shoulder. The sound he made, like a pig rooting. I thought of you. I thought of the tomatoes. I thought of the cabbages surviving the frost. I did it for Nick. I would do it again. I would burn the gallery down. I would kill him with my hands if I could. But I cannot. Not yet. Do not hate me. Do not forgive me. Just know. I am the fortress. The fortress holds. Giulia. Vito stared at the paper. The ink was blue ballpoint, pressed hard, tearing the cheap paper in places. The jasmine petals were crushed to dust against the fibers. He felt nothing. No rage. No jealousy. The grief had been cauterized years ago, replaced by a cold, surgical clarity. She had traded her body for their son's breath. It was a transaction. The only currency the Underworld accepted. He pulled the penlight closer. He had a pen. A Bic crystal blue. He had no paper. He had the margins of Purgatorio. He bit the tip of his index finger. Deep. The blood welled, hot and metallic, instant as a signature. He wrote in the white space beside Dante's tercets. Non ti odio. Non ti perdono. Ti testimonio. I do not hate you. I do not forgive you. I witness you. He wrote more. The debt is paid. Nick breathes. That is the ledger. The rest is noise. I am coming home soon. Not to Laval. To Colorado. Wait for me there. In the letters. In the jasmine. I will find you in the dark. He pressed the page to his finger, sealing the blood into the fiber. Testimonio. Witness. The only love language left to them. He ate the page. Chewed the pulp of Dante and blood and jasmine until it was paste, swallowed it down with a mouthful of tepid water from the sink. The evidence destroyed. The message delivered through the only secure channel left. The legal mail. Gus would take the book back, mail it to the lawyer in Montreal, who would pass the verbatim transcript to Giulia during a privileged visit. The system worked. The architecture held. May arrived with a heat wave that turned the limestone of Kingston into a kiln. The extradition hearing in Montreal was a theater of the absurd. Vito watched it on a grainy television in the common room, surrounded by lifers cheering for the hockey game on the other channel. His lawyer, a sharp-edged woman named Marie France, argued sovereignty. Argued double jeopardy. Argued the Canadian Charter. The Crown prosecutor, a pale man in an ill-fitting suit, argued the treaty. Argued the evidence, the wiretaps from Berth 37. The voice on the intercept, Vito's voice, authorizing the 2.3 tons. The judge, a political appointee with eyes on the federal court, ruled. The treaty is binding. The offense, conspiracy to commit murder 1981, racketeering 2004, is extraditable. The Minister of Justice signs the surrender order. Surrender. The word tasted of copper. Vito was moved that night. No goodbyes. No final espresso at Consiglio S. A convoy of unmarked Crown Vics, lights killed, engines growling low. The 401, west to the 417 east. The border at Lacal. The night was moonless. The scent. Lawrence a black mirror, reflecting the stars. They stopped at the duty-free shop parking lot. The transfer point. The Americans waited on their side. A fleet of black Suburbans, U.S. Marshals in tactical vests, the blue and red lights of the border patrol spinning silent halos in the dark. Vito stepped out of the Canadian vehicle. The air was cold, smelling of ozone and exhaust. He wore his own clothes now. A charcoal Brioni suit, stored for 2 years in an evidence locker, pressed sharp. Leather loafers. No handcuffs. Not yet. The Canadians unshackled him at the line. A gesture of sovereignty. He leaves as a citizen. He enters as a target. Standing at the yellow line, painted on the asphalt. The 45th parallel. The imaginary line that divided his life. 50 yards away, behind a chain-link fence topped with razor wire, a black sedan idled. The window rolled down. Giulia. She hadn't come to the prison for the final visit. She had come here. To the border. To the membrane. She wore the slate coat. Her hair was loose tonight, blowing in the wind off the river. She held onto the fence, fingers woven through the diamond mesh. Her face was pale, illuminated by the harsh sodium lamps. Vito walked to the fence. The marshals didn't stop him. The Mounties didn't stop him. They knew the optics. The architect saying goodbye to his fortress. He stopped at the chain link. The metal was freezing against his palms. He pressed his right hand flat against the wire, the diamonds imprinting on his skin. Giulia pressed her left hand against the other side. Palm to palm. Flesh to flesh. Separated by quarter-inch steel and international law. No glass. Just wire. Air. Distance. He leaned his forehead against the cold metal. She did the same. Their breaths misted in the gap, mingling, indistinguishable. White clouds in the black night. 18 months, she whispered. The wind stole the words, but he read them on her lips. The transfer treaty. I invoked it. The Canadians agreed. The Americans. They stall. But the paperwork is filed. You come back to Canada to serve the rest. Kent Institution. Medium. Not Supermax, Kent. Agassiz. Mountains. Rain. Not the dry, sucking vacuum of Florence. Who did you pay? He asked. His voice didn't carry. He spoke for the space between the wires. Elena Rossi. The name hit him harder than the sniper's bullet that would take Nick later. Elena Rossi. The hunter. The RCMP officer who grew up in St. Leonard. The one who approached Giulia at the gala. Your husband's empire floats on heroin. Help me sink it. You made a deal with the devil. I made a deal with a woman who lost a brother to your peace. She wants the plaza. She wants the headlines. I gave her the plaza on a silver platter. The ledgers. The roots. The names. Everything but you. Everything but the boys. She gets her career. I get your transfer, Giulia. The empire is noise, Vito. I told you. The rest is noise. Her fingers tightened on the wire, knuckles white. You are the signal. Nick. Leah. Me. We are the signal. Burn the noise. Salt the earth. Just come back to us, he looked at her. Really looked. At the gray at her temples. The exhaustion carved into the hollows of her cheeks. The fierce, terrifying love burning in eyes the color of winter sky. I will walk out of Florence, he said. A vow. A prophecy. I will walk through the mountains. I will swim the rivers. I will crawl over broken glass. But I will come through that gate. And when I do, I will have a list, she smiled then. A terrible, beautiful thing. A baring of teeth. I know. I keep the pen ready. The blood is warm. The Canadian officer tapped his watch. Time. The U.S. Marshals moved forward. Heavy boots on asphalt. Mr. Resume. Now, Vito pressed his palm harder against the wire. Giulia pressed back. The diamond mesh bit into both their hands. A shared stigmata. Per sempre, he breathed. Per sempre, she answered. He pulled away. The contact broke. The mist vanished. He walked toward the black Suburbans. He didn't look back. Architects don't look at the foundations once the building stands. They trust the math. He climbed into the rear seat. The door slammed shut, a sound like a coffin lid. The engine turned over. The convoy moved north, crossing the line, leaving the frozen shadows of Montreal for the dry, high-altitude dark of Colorado. Behind him, in the rearview mirror, the chain-link fence shrank. A single figure stood gripping the wire. A woman in a slate coat. A fortress holding the line against the avalanche. Vito Rizzuto closed his eyes. In the dark behind his lids, he saw the olive groves of Cattolica Heraclea. He saw the tomatoes blighting. He saw the cabbages surviving the frost. He began to write the list in his mind. 14 names. Written in toothpaste on toilet paper. Written in blood on Dante. Justice, he thought, as the wheels hit the American interstate. Not revenge. Justice is architecture. Revenge is just the demolition crew. The miles unspooled. The border faded. The war had just begun. Chapter 5. The air at ADX Florence didn't move. It settled. It pooled in the corners of the 7 by 12-foot concrete box like stagnant water, thick with the dust of pulverized rock and the ghost scent of thousands of exhalations. Despair, rage, the particular metallic tang of madness. There was no wind here, not in the secure housing unit, not in H Unit, where the Bureau of Prisons buried the men it could not break and would not kill. Vito Rizzuto sat on the edge of his bunk, a slab of poured concrete covered by a 2-inch foam mattress wrapped in green vinyl. He was 58 years old. His hair, once the color of wet crow feathers, had faded to a distinguished salt and pepper, kept short by the monthly shear of the prison barber. His face, tanned by decades of Montreal summers and Sicilian suns, had bleached to the color of parchment under the hum of the fluorescent fixture that never, never went dark. The light was a torture device designed by bureaucrats, a constant, buzzing noon that erased shadows, erased time, erased the circadian rhythm that grounded a man to the earth. He held a book, La Divina Commedia. The pages were thin as onion skin, yellowed at the edges, the Italian text a lifeline thrown across the abyss of English-only regulations. He read the same tercets over and over, the rhythm of the hendecasyllables a metronome for a heart that refused to race, refused to slow. Nel mezzo del camin di nostra vita / mi ritrovi per una selva oscura, che la dirida via eris marita. Midway upon the journey of our life. He had been midway once. Now he was in the 9th circle. Frozen in the ice of Cocytus, head and shoulders above the surface, tears freezing in his eye sockets. The slot at the bottom of the steel door clanged open. A tray slid in. Powdered eggs. A rubbery sausage link. A carton of milk that tasted of the plastic it came in. Vito didn't look up. He didn't eat. He placed a finger between the pages of the Dante, marking Canto XXXII, and stood. 3 steps to the door. 3 steps back. The cell was a coffin standing on end. He pressed his face to the narrow, reinforced glass window, 4 inches by 48, angled so you couldn't see the corridor, only a slice of the opposite wall. The window to the world. It framed a concrete wall stained with something dark near the floor. 23 hours, he thought. 23 hours in the box. 1 hour in the cage. The cage was a recreation yard. A concrete pit open to the sky, 20 feet by 30, surrounded by walls 20 feet high, topped with razor wire that gleamed like silver teeth against the Colorado blue. You could see a slice of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains if you craned your neck just right. Jagged teeth tearing the horizon. Beautiful. Lethal. He heard the heavy boots before the voice. The rhythm was wrong for the guards, too slow, too deliberate. A shuffle, a drag. The mob doctor. They called him Doctor. Though his real name was Vincenzo Morti, formerly of the Genovese family, formerly a thoracic surgeon at Bellevue, currently serving life plus 20 for RICO and 3 counts of murder for hire. Terminal lung cancer had eaten his left lung and was chewing on the right. He coughed wetly, a sound like tearing canvas, audible through the 6-inch gap at the bottom of the door and the ventilation shaft that connected their cells, a vertical artery of stolen air. Vito, the voice rasped through the vent, amplified by the metal ductwork. You read that poem again. You going to wear a groove in the floor pacing? Vito leaned close to the vent, his mouth near the cold metal grating. Dante is the only architect who built a structure that lasts forever, Vincenzo. The Bureau of Prisons builds boxes. Dante built a universe for dead men, Morty wheezed. Listen to me. The mail. The legal mail. It's the only artery they can't clamp shut without a court order. You write your letters. You cite case law. Bounds v. Smith. Lewis v. Casey. You flood the zone. You bury the wardens in paperwork. Every letter to your lawyer is a bullet. Every motion is a grenade. But you need a code. The feds read everything. Even the privileged mail gets photocopied by mistake. Vito closed his eyes. He saw the map of Montreal in his mind. The St. Lawrence freezing over, the orange julep glowing on Carey, the espresso steam rising at Consiglio, S. Teach me the code, doctor. I have time. Nothing but time. Time is the one thing you don't have, Morty said, a hacking cough rattling the vent cover. They gave me 6 months. That was 8 months ago. I'm living on borrowed breath. But you're the architect. You build things. Build a pipeline out of paper. Use the citations. Hide the message in the footnotes. The case name is the address. The pin site is the instruction. United States v. Salerno, 481 U.S. 739. Page 7, footnote 3. Preventive detention means the shipment is delayed. Turner v. Safley, 482 U.S. 78. Reasonable relationship means the money is clean. You memorize the reporter volumes. You become a law library. Vito pressed his forehead to the cool steel. And the replies. How do I read the return signal? Your lawyer visits. Once a month. He brings the discovery, boxes of documents. You read the footnotes in the prosecution's briefs. They signal back the same way. It's slow. It's tedious. It's the only way to touch the world without them cutting off your fingers. A guard's shadow fell across the slot. The heavy boots paused. Lockdown, the guard barked through the steel. Step back from the door. Ventilation check. Vito retreated to his bunk, sitting hands on knees, the picture of compliance. The vent cover rattled as a tool engaged it from the outside. A flashlight beam pierced the darkness of the duct. The guard wasn't looking for contraband. He was looking for connection. He found only dust. The boots retreated. The vent cover settled. Good boy, Morty whispered. Now read me the canto. The one about Ugolino. I want to hear the Italian before I sleep. It sounds like home. Vito picked up the book. His voice was low, resonant, vibrating against the concrete. Poi più ci el dolor petelo digiuno. Then hunger proved more powerful than grief. He read until the voice in the vent slowed, deepened, and finally stopped, leaving only the rattle of damaged lungs and the hum of the eternal light. The month bled into the next. The seasons turned outside the razor wire, Colorado winter burying the mountains in white, spring bleeding mud, summer scorching the concrete yard until the air shimmered like a mirage. Inside, there was only the light and the dark, the hour the bulb was dimmed to a nightlight glow for sleep. Then came the Thursday. The rhythm of the boots changed. Lighter. Sharper. Heels clicking on concrete. Perfume, faint, expensive, jasmine and rain, cut through the institutional stink of industrial cleaner and boiled cabbage. Vito stood at the door before the slot opened. He didn't pace today. He waited. The slot clanged. A tray didn't slide through. A hand did. Pale, slender, nails trimmed short, no polish. Fingers spread against the cold steel grate of the slot cover. Vito went to his knees. He didn't kiss the hand. He pressed his fingertips to hers, the steel mesh a brutal filter, allowing only the whisper of contact. The pads of his fingers, calloused from a lifetime of construction, of gripping steering wheels, of holding espresso cups, met the soft skin of Alina Rossi. Her eyes, visible through the narrow rectangular vision panel in the door, bulletproof glass, scratched by keys, clouded by breath, were dark, fathomless. She wore a charcoal pantsuit, no badge visible, no gun. Just a leather satchel. Buongiorno, Vito, she whispered. Her Italian was flawless, northern accent, Milanese precision wrapping the Neapolitan vowels. You look gray. Gray is the color of stone, Alina, he replied, his voice rough from disuse. He spoke rarely, saving his vocal cords for the shout through the vent, for the legal dictation. Stone endures. She withdrew her hand, reaching into the satchel. She produced a paperback book, À la Recherche du Temps Perdu, Volume 1, Du Côté de Chez Swann. French. Proust. And a small, sealed plastic evidence bag. Inside, crushed but fragrant, a sprig of jasmine flowers, white petals browned at the edges. They x-rayed the book, she said, sliding them through the slot onto the metal ledge. They sniffed the flowers. The dog didn't alert on nostalgia. Lucky us, Vito picked up the flowers first. He held the bag to the vent in the door, inhaling deeply. The scent exploded in his sinuses, sweet, heady, violent. Giulia. His wife's garden in Laval. The trellis by the kitchen window. 20 years of Sundays, condensed into a gram of dried petals. She sends these, he asked, his throat tight. She grows them, Alina corrected gently. She presses them in her heavy art books. L'Espresso, Le Monde. She sends them to my office. I bring them here. Unofficially. Off the books. If the Inspector General knew I was running a floral delivery service for a RICO defendant. You risk your pension for dried flowers. I risk my pension for the chess game, she said, a ghost of a smile touching her lips. And for the Dante. Did you finish Inferno? I am stuck in the ninth circle, Alina. Ugolino, gnawing the skull of Ruggery. It is familiar. Ugolino ate his children's hearts, she said, her voice dropping, the professional mask slipping a micron. You didn't eat Nick's heart. You built him a kingdom. Vito's hand clenched on the plastic bag. The crinkle was loud in the silence. Nick is alive. He runs the streets. He sits in my chair at Consiglio S. He is the Don now. In name, she agreed. And the old man. Niccolo Sr., he is 86. He sits in the driveway of the Shadow, feeding the pigeons. He refuses to die. He refuses to retire. He is the anchor. Anchors drown you, Vito, she said. Or they keep you from drifting into open water. Which is it? He looked at her through the scratched glass. She was the only color in his world. The only softness. The hunter who had become the witness. RCMP, integrated organized crime. She had grown up 3 blocks from Consiglio's, the smell of frying zeppali and gunpowder in the air. Her brother Marco had vanished in '94. Lupara Bianca. White shotgun. No body. Everyone knew Vito sanctioned it. Everyone knew Vito did it. She should hate him. She did hate him. And yet she came. Every month. She brought Proust. She brought flowers. She brought the Globe and Mail, folded carefully, the business section highlighted. You play white today, she said, pulling a magnetic travel chess set from the bag. She set it on the ledge. I'll play black. Sicilian defense. Naturally, he murmured. He moved a pawn. E4. She moved instantly. C5. Your move, architect. They played in silence for 20 minutes. The only sounds, the click of magnetic pieces, the rasp of her breath, the wet rattle of Morty's cough from the vent next door, the hum of the light. Check, she said. Vito studied the board. 3 moves to mate. He saw it. He saw the trap. He saw the sacrifice. He moved his queen. Checkmate, she stared at the board. You let me take the queen. You sacrificed the rook 2 moves ago. You walked me into a smothered mate. The king survives, Vito said. The queen dies. The rook dies. The pawn promotes. The king survives. Is that the strategy? Survival. She packed the board away, her fingers trembling slightly. Because the paper today, the Globe, she hesitated. She pulled the newspaper from the bag. It was dated November 14, 2009. Yesterday. Vito took it. His hands didn't shake. He turned to page 3. Mob boss, NICULO RIZZUTOSR. Slain in driveway sniper attack. Laval, Quebec. The founding patriarch of the Rizzuto crime family, Niccolo Rizzuto, 86, was killed by a single high-caliber round fired from a concealed position early this morning as he sat in his wheelchair on the driveway of the family estate in Laval. Sources confirm a .308 Winchester cartridge was recovered. The Sûreté du Québec has launched a major investigation. The photo beside the headline, the shade out. The circular driveway. A white sheet over a shape in a wheelchair. Pigeons exploding into the gray sky, blurred by the shutter speed. Vito read the words. He read the quotes from police sources. He read the speculation, power vacuum. Retaliation for the 2004 bust. Endrang had a move. Cotrony revenge. He read it all. His face was a mask of Carrara marble. No flicker in the jaw. No moisture in the eyes. He folded the paper with surgical precision, creasing the edges with a thumbnail. The old lion, Vito said, his voice devoid of inflection. He died in the snow. On his own driveway. Feeding the birds. Vito, Alina started. I'm sorry. I didn't want you to find out this way. I tried to get a message to Morty, but the vent is fine, Vito interrupted. The mail is fine. The chess is fine. He stood up. He towered over the slot, a giant in a box. He leaned close to the glass, his breath fogging the bulletproof panel. Alina, he said. Listen to me. You listen good. Because this is the only thing I will ever ask of you. The only thing. She didn't move. Her hand rested on the steel ledge, inches from his face. Get me a pen, he whispered. A ballpoint. Blue ink. And toilet paper. The rough kind. The industrial rolls. Get them to my lawyer. Tell him client instruction number 1 has been activated. Vito, you can't. I am not asking for a favor, Agent Rossi, he said, the title ablaze. I am giving an order. From the hole. From the 9th circle. The old man is dead. The shield is broken. The war starts now. And I will burn Montreal to ash to salt the earth where my father fell. He pulled back, the fog on the glass fading. 14 names, he said, turning toward his bunk, toward the Dante, toward the wall. I will write 14 names in toothpaste on the wall if I have to. But I need the paper. I need the pen. Make it happen. Or I will make you watch what happens when the architect stops building and starts demolishing. The slot clanged shut. The heels clicked away. The jasmine scent lingered, fading behind the smell of boiled cabbage and concrete dust. Vito stood in the center of the cell. He looked at the vent. Vincenzo, he shouted, his voice a thunderclap in the duct. Did you hear? The old lion is dead. A pause. A wet hack. I heard Vist. The guards were talking. They love the gossip. The godfather is dead. They say the son is next. They say the war is here. The war has always been here, Vito said. He pulled the toothpaste tube from his pocket, the only personal item allowed, 3 ounces, mint flavor. He unscrewed the cap. Doctor, teach me the code for execute. I need to write letters tonight. 14 of them. 14, Morty wheezed. 14 funerals. You're a busy man, architect. I don't build hospitals anymore, Vincenzo, Vito said, squeezing the tube. A white ribbon of paste curled onto his finger. He walked to the blank concrete wall beside his bunk. I build cemeteries, he began to write. Small. Precise. The names came from a memory palace that had never forgotten a face, a license plate, a debt, a betrayal. 1. Salvador, Montana. 2. Francesco Cotrini. 3. The paste dried white on gray, invisible to the camera in the corner until the light hit it just right. A list. A ledger. A blueprint for hell. Outside, the Colorado sun set behind the Sangre de Cristos, painting the razor wire gold. Inside, the fluorescent light buzzed, eternal, witnessing the architecture of revenge. Chapter 6. The funeral and the sniper. The snow did not fall on Montreal that morning. It drifted, a slow, geological sifting of white ash over a city that had forgotten the color of grass. It collected on the shoulders of the black coats clustered at the gates of Mount Royal Cemetery, on the polished chrome of the limousines idling on Chemin de la Forêt, and on the Carrara marble of the Rizzuto Mausoleum, where the eternal gas flames shuddered behind stained glass, burning blue and anonymous in the gray light. 2,000 people. Vito would have counted them, categorized them. 200 made men and associates. 300 politicians, union bosses, and developers who needed the dust on their palms to be gold. 500 curious onlookers, tourists of tragedy. The rest, widows, mothers, children, and the RCMP surveillance teams pretending to read newspapers behind the skeletal oaks. But Vito was not here. He was 7,000 kilometers south, buried in a concrete box where the sun was a theoretical concept. Giulia stood at the apex of the stone steps, leading to the mausoleum's bronze doors. She wore a coat of black cashmere, tailored in Milan, the collar turned up against a wind that tasted of iron and old limestone. No veil. The women of Calabria did not hide their grief behind lace. They wore it like a medal or a target. Her face was a mask of porcelain, eyes the color of the winter sky over the scent. Lawrence, pale, depthless, revealing nothing. Her gloved hands were folded at her waist, resting atop a crocodile handbag that contained a snub-nosed .38, a rosary, and a folded letter from a supermax prison in Colorado, written in lemon juice and heat. Beside her, Leonardo was a coil of tension, dressed in a Zegna suit that cost more than the shooter's rifle. He was 26, broad-shouldered like his father, but his hands, long, elegant, stained historically with charcoal and blueprint ink, were clenched into fists so tight the knuckles strained against the skin. He had not spoken since the phone call 3 days ago. Not a word. Not at the viewings, not at the Mass at Madonna della Difesa, where the incense had choked the air thicker than the snow. He vibrated at a frequency only dogs and hitmen could hear. Nick's casket was closed. A single white rose lay on the mahogany lid. There was no other option. The .308 Winchester round had entered the left temple at a downward angle. Ballistics would later confirm a trajectory from the bell tower of the Université de Montréal's Roger Gaudry Pavilion, 400 meters south-southwest, and exited in a spray of bone and matter that no mortician's art could fully disguise. Nick Jr., the heir, the MBA, the man who was going to take the family legit, looked like a sleeping angel only if you didn't look too close. Which Giulia didn't. She had kissed his forehead in the salon of the Chateau, tasting embalming fluid and cold wax, and whispered, "Say salvo ora. Say al sicuro, you are safe now. You are secure." The lie tasted like espresso grounds. Father Morty's voice drifted over the crowd, Latin and Italian braided together, the Requiem Aeternam swallowed by the wind. The Hell's Angels nomads stood in a phalanx near the wrought iron fence, leather cut stiff in the cold, Ray Deschamps at their center. Ray's face was carved from granite, a boxer's nose flattened, eyes hidden behind aviators. He didn't cry. He calculated. He looked at the sightlines, the rooftops, the tree line. He knew the geometry of death, as well as Vito ever did. Jerry Maddox stood apart, leaning on a cane, his Irish face ruddy against the white, breath pluming. The Doc King. He had buried 2 sons himself. He knew the arithmetic of loss. It never balanced. Frankie Cotrani wasn't there. He never left his hospital bed in the Jewish General, tethered to oxygen and hatred, but his captains were here, shoulders broad, eyes hard. Sally Montana stood near the back, handsome in a charcoal brioni, sunglasses on, one hand in his pocket, likely on a phone, recording, transmitting. The wolf. He watched Giulia with the patience of a spider. The service ended. The pallbearers, 6 captains, Nick's childhood friends, men who had stolen cars and run numbers together in St. Leonard, lifted the casket. The weight shifted. A low groan from the wood. The procession moved toward the mausoleum. 20 yards. 15. 10. Giulia moved first. Not a flinch. A pivot. Her left foot planted, her right hip driving forward, the handbag swinging up not as a shield, but as a distraction, a flash of red crocodile against the monochrome world. Crack. The sound was not a bang. It was a whip snap, a violent displacement of air, distinct and terrifyingly final. It arrived before the bullet, or so the physics of terror dictated. Nick's casket lurched as a pallbearer. Tony, the nose, D'Amico, crumpled sideways, his face suddenly a ruin of red, the casket tilting, sliding from shoulders, hitting the icy paving stones with a hollow thud that vibrated up through the soles of Giulia's boots. Screams. Not screams, roars. The crowd became a single organism of panic, surging backward, trampling wreaths, knocking over the portable heaters. Leo moved faster than thought. He didn't draw a weapon, he didn't look for cover. He launched himself at Giulia, a human missile of muscle and desperation, tackling her into the drifted snow beside the mausoleum steps. He drove her down hard, his body covering hers, his face pressed into the wool of her coat, his breath hot and ragged against her ear. Mama. Mama, Stagiu. Down. Stay down. Giulia didn't struggle. She lay pinned beneath her youngest son, the cold seeping through her coat, the snow crystals sharp against her cheek. She smelled gun oil, expensive wool, and the copper tang of Tony D'Amico's blood steaming on the gray slush 3 feet away. Then came the second sound. Not a shot. A howl. It tore from her throat, a primal vowel ripped from the deepest stratum of the mother animal. No, it wasn't a word. It was the sound of a dynasty fracturing. It echoed off the marble walls, scattering the pigeons from the eaves, stopping the panic in the crowd for a fractured heartbeat. No. 2 letters. The negation of the future. The refusal of the script. Leo flinched as if struck, his shoulders hunching tighter over her. Mama, per favor. SHH. We have to move. Debiamo Ander, his voice cracked. The architect, the builder of dreams, was gone. Only the soldier remained. Above them, Ray Deschamps was barking orders into a radio, his men forming a diamond around the casket, around Niccolo S.R.'s tomb, around the living Don's empty chair. Jerry Maddox's men, dockworkers turned gunmen, were scaling the fence toward the university campus, moving with the heavy, deliberate speed of men who knew they were running into the fire, not away. Sirens. The wail of the SBVM, the SQ, the RCMP. Late, always late, the soundtrack of the aftermath. ADX Florence, Colorado Z Unit, range 13. 14, 17 MSD. The air in cell 134 was scrubbed clean of humidity, tasting of industrial detergent, stainless steel, and the slow, metallic oxidation of despair. It was a temperature-controlled vacuum, 72 degrees, constant. No seasons here. Only the fluorescent hum, the slam of the remote-controlled steel door, and the endless, grinding white noise of the ventilation system. Vito Rizzuto sat on the concrete ledge that served as a bed. He wore the khaki jumpsuit, the canvas sneakers. His hair, once jet, was silver at the temples, trimmed short by the prison barber. His hands that had signed contracts worth billions, that had held his grandchildren, that had pulled triggers in a Brooklyn social club in '81, rested on his knees. Still, perfectly still. He had not moved in 40 minutes. Not since the slot in his door had slid open, and a gloved hand had pushed through a single, white envelope. No postmark. No return address. Legal mail stamp, privileged communication, attorney-client. The paper inside was heavy bond, folded in thirds. He had opened it with the deliberation of a surgeon. Inside, nestled in a fold of cotton batting, lay the ring. It was heavy gold, the Rizzuto crest engraved deep, a rampant lion holding a sword fortitudine et prudentia. Nick's signet ring. The one Vito had given him on his 18th birthday, the one Niccolo SR. Had sneered at, jewelry for a banker, not a don. Now it was cold against Vito's fingertip. He didn't put it on. He held it up to the slit of a window, 4 inches by 4 feet, reinforced glass, framing a slice of the Rocky Mountains, snow-capped, indifferent. 400 meters. A .308. Clean entry. Professional. Not a biker. Not a street soldier. A contractor. Or a soldier of fortune. The analysis was instantaneous, clinical, the architect reviewing the blueprints of a catastrophe he hadn't designed but now owned. They hit the air at the father's gate. They want me to break. They want the fortress to crumble from the inside out. The slot clicked open again. A tray slid through. Lunch. Tray loaf, green beans, a carton of milk. The guard didn't speak. They never spoke. Vito ignored the food. He turned his back to the door, facing the wall. He reached into the waistband of his jumpsuit and retrieved a small, folded square of toilet paper, 2-ply, hoarded over weeks, and the nub of a toothpaste tube, the cap lost long ago. He uncapped the paste with his teeth. He didn't pray. He didn't weep. The architect did not weep. He calculated. He pressed the toothpaste to the paper. It beaded white on white. Name 1. He wrote in a script so small it required magnification to read. A cramped, precise hand. Salvatore Montana. Name 2. Frank Ciotiroani. Name 3. Giuseppe Colucci. Montana's lieutenant, the trigger puller if the intel held. Name 4. Piewolo Ariandia. Cotterny's captain, the logistics. He wrote 14 names. 14 pillars holding up the roof of the rebellion. 14 heartbeats that would cease. He wrote the 15th name last, separate, at the bottom of the square. He pressed harder, the paste gouging the paper. Me. The shooter. The ghost in the bell tower. Unknown. For now, he folded the paper into a tiny square, smaller than a postage stamp. He palmed it, turned back to the door. The slot was open. A face peered in. Not a guard. Elena Rossi. She wore a charcoal wool coat over a dark suit, her hair pulled back in a severe chignon. Her badge was clipped to her belt, hidden under the coat. Her eyes, dark, exhausted, ringed with the gray of sleepless nights, met his through the plexiglass barrier of the visiting booth, but she wasn't in the booth. She was here, on the range, having bypassed 3 checkpoints, 2 wardens, and the Bureau of Prisons director's direct order, flashing a credential that existed only in the gray area between RCMP liaison status and FBI indifference. Vito! Her voice was a whisper, carried through the steel mesh of the cell door's upper vent. He didn't turn immediately. He slipped the toilet paper list into the hollow heel of his sneaker. Elena, his voice was gravel, unused. You're a long way from St. Leonard. I brought it through legal mail. The ring. I had it couriered from the morgue. The coroner. He owes me a favor from 98. A thing with his daughter. She swallowed, her breath fogging the mesh. I risked 20 years. My pension. My clearance. For this, Vito turned then. He gripped the bars of the inner gate, the cold steel biting his palms. He was a lion in a cage the size of a walk-in closet, but the power dynamic had inverted. She was the one trembling. He was the one rooted. Did you see her? He asked. Giulia. Did you see the snow on her face? Elena's jaw tightened. I saw the feed. The drone footage. The local news chopper. She didn't run. She didn't hide. She screamed. A mother's scream, Vito said. It is the only sound that shakes the foundations of hell. Vito! She stepped closer, her fingers reaching through the mesh, stretching toward him. The list. I know you. You're making a list. Don't. Please. This is the inflection point. If you give the order from here, they'll never let you go. Not to Canada. Not to a hospital. You'll die in this box. He looked at her fingers. Pale, manicured, trembling. The fingers that had turned the pages of Dante for him, that had smuggled jasmine petals pressed between the pages of In Search of Lost Time, that had brushed his once, 3 months ago, a touch that had burned hotter than the fires of the seventh circle. He didn't take her hand. He couldn't. The distance was the only thing keeping him human. Elena, he said, his voice dropping to a register that vibrated in the steel. You asked me once why I read the Inferno. You said it was a manual for the damned. You were wrong. It is a map. And I have just reached the 9th circle. Treachery. The frozen lake. My son, my Nick, is encased in the ice up to his neck. And the ones who put him there, they are skating on the surface. He leaned closer, his eyes burning. I am not making a list for murder, Agent. I am writing the names of the ice. So I know where to step when I walk out of here. You may never walk out. Then Leo will walk for me. And Giulia. Giulia will clear the path. He pulled his hand back, the ring flashing gold in the dim light. Tell me about the shooter. The trajectory. The brass. The fiber evidence. Now, Elena stared at him. The hunter. The witness. The woman who loved the monster, because he was the only one who saw her as human. She saw the decision calcify in his face, the softness of the husband, the father, the reader of Proust, hardening into the diamond of the dawn. She reached into her coat pocket. Not for a gun. For a folded printout. Forensic preliminary. Unofficial. Illegal. She pressed it against the mesh. 400 meters. Rooftop access via the maintenance elevator, keycard cloned. Shooter prone bipod. Single casing. Federal gold medal match .308. No prints. Fibers, synthetic blend, high-end tactical ghillie suit. Canadian military issue. Maybe. Or CSIS. Or a private contractor from the Balkans. The angle. Vito, the angle was down. He was shooting into the driveway. He didn't care about the pallbearers. He wanted the casket. Or the woman behind it. Vito took the paper, memorized it in 3 seconds, palmed it. Giulia, he whispered. He wanted Giulia. Or he wanted you to watch Giulia die. From here. Helpless, Vito's smile was a terrible thing. A rictus of teeth. Then he doesn't know Giulia. And he doesn't know me. He turned back to his concrete bunk. He sat down. He began to write a letter. Not in lemon juice. In pencil. On official prison stationery. To my wife, Giulia. The olives are ripe in Cattolica Iraklia. The press is waiting. Come home soon. The house is cold without you. V. He folded it, sealed it. He would give it to the guard. It would go through censors. It would arrive in Westmount smelling of antiseptic and diesel. It was the only mercy he could offer. Elena, he said, not turning around. Go home. Hug your mother. Eat a cannoli. Forget this place exists. I can't, she said to his back. I'm the only one who knows you're not a ghost yet. Then haunt me less, he murmured. And watch the perimeter. The list. The list is already in motion. She stood there a moment longer, her silhouette framed by the range's harsh lights. Then the heavy outer door buzzed, clanged shut. The lock threw. She was gone. Vito exhaled, a long, slow release of breath that seemed to come from the bottom of the earth. He picked up the Dante, Inferno, Canto XXXII. Ugolino, gnawing the skull of Ruggery. The ultimate betrayal. The father eating the children. He opened the book. But he didn't read. He stared at the blank flyleaf, and in his mind, he saw the snow on Mount Royal, red on white, and the sound of a mother screaming no into the indifference of the universe. Justice, he thought, the word tasting of iron and espresso. Not revenge. Justice is architecture. Revenge is just debris. He began to underline passages with the pencil, mapping the way out. Mount Royal Cemetery. 11:42 EST. The snow fell harder now, covering the blood, covering the footsteps, covering the tire tracks of the black SUV that had fled the university campus 20 minutes ago, empty, burned out, found by a patrol car on the slopes of the mountain. Giulia sat in the back of the lead Lincoln town car. The heater blasted. Leo sat beside her, his suit jacket gone, his shirt torn at the collar, his knuckles raw and bloody, not from the tackle, but from punching the frozen ground afterward, screaming at the sky until his voice broke. Maria Consolini sat across from them. She was 3 months pregnant, her coat unbuttoned, her face pale as the snow. She held Giulia's hand. Giulia's gloves were off. Her rings, diamonds, the wedding band, the sapphire Vito had bought in Bangkok, clicked against Maria's knuckles. No one spoke. The driver navigated the winding roads of the cemetery, past the mausoleum where Nick now lay in the crypt beside his grandfather, past the fresh turned earth of Tony D'Amico's hasty grave, pauper's section, unmarked, the cost of loyalty. They passed the gates onto Chemin de la Côte des Neiges. The city spread below. The orange julep, the Olympic Stadium's inclined tower, the port cranes like praying mantises against the gray river. Giulia looked at her son. Leo's profile was hard, carved from the same stone as his father's. The artist was dead. The architect of vengeance had been born in the snow beside a coffin. She looked at Maria. The future. A child who would know this name, this weight, this winter. She looked at her own hands. The signet ring was gone. Vito had it. Or the earth did. Or the sniper. She reached into her crocodile bag. Past the .38. Past the rosary. She pulled out the folded letter from Colorado. The lemon juice had browned perfectly when she held it over the candle in the church sacristy. V. The olives are ripe. Come home soon. She read it for the 10th time. She didn't cry. The tears were frozen in the duct, a reservoir behind a dam that would not break until the last name on the list was crossed out. She folded the letter. Put it back in the bag. Snap. Drive, she said to the partition. Shade you. The war room. The car accelerated, tires crunching on the salted asphalt. Behind them, the cemetery disappeared into the whiteout. The marble mausoleum stood silent, the eternal flames burning blue, the only warmth in a city gone cold. Fortitudine et prudentia. Strength and prudence. Giulia closed her eyes. She saw the list. She didn't know the names. She didn't need to. She knew the handwriting. Fortitudine. That was Vito's part. The killing. Prudentia. That was hers. The survival. She would need all of it. The car turned onto the highway north, toward Laval. Toward the fortress. Toward the fire. Chapter 7. The rebellion the winter of 2010 did not merely arrive in Montreal. It occupied the city. It settled into the mortar of the brick row houses in St. Leonard, froze the breath of the homeless in the metro tunnels, and turned the scent. Lawrence into a solid, groaning plain of white that swallowed the horizon whole. It was a winter that demanded allegiance, and if you did not give it willingly, it took it from your fingers and toes. Leo Rizzuto felt the cold in his teeth. He stood in the shadowed alcove of a shuttered dépanneur on Rue Beaubien, the smell of stale cigarettes and wet wool thick in his nostrils. The .38 snub-nosed revolver inside his jacket pocket was a dead weight, colder than the air, heavy with a finality that no architecture studio in Milan had ever prepared him for. He had drawn floor plans for light and flow, for cantilevers that defied gravity. He had not drawn blueprints for this, the geometry of a man's last seconds. Across the street, the target emerged from a basement social club. Marco, the mute Sciarra. Lieutenant to Salvador, Montana. 40 years old, thick neck, hands that had broken jaws and collected envelopes with equal indifference. He wore a Canada Goose parka, the fur rough stiff with ice, and carried a steaming cardboard tray of 4 coffees, a peace offering for the crew waiting inside a heated garage. Ordinary, Leo thought, a hysterical bubble of laughter rising in his chest, trapped behind clenched teeth. He's buying coffee. He has a mother, maybe. A wife. He worries about the price of heating oil. Leo's gloved hand closed around the grip. The metal bit his palm through the leather. Steady. Breathe. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Like shooting clays at the club in Mirabel. Lead the target. Follow through. Sciarra paused at the curb, fishing for keys, the steam from the coffee tray curling upward like a prayer in the freezing air. A streetlight flickered, buzzing with a sound like a dying fly. A car passed, tires hissing on salted slush, headlights painting Leo's face in a brief, guilty white. Now. Leo stepped from the alcove. He didn't run. Running implied flight. He walked, his boots crunching on the crust, the rhythm of his gait eating the distance. 10 meters. 5. Sciarra looked up. Recognition flickered, too slow. The mute had never spoken a word in his life, but his eyes screamed a whole vocabulary in that final second. Surprise. Calculation. Fear. Regret. Leo raised the gun. 2 shots. Crack. Crack. Sharp, flat sounds swallowed by the snow-laden air. Sciarra folded. The coffee tray arced upward, a slow-motion explosion of brown liquid and cardboard, raining down on the beige parka, steaming violently on the cold asphalt. The keys clattered, lost instantly in a drift. Leo didn't watch him die. He didn't check for a pulse. He turned, walked back to the idling rental car, a generic silver Toyota, plate stolen from a lot in Laval, slid into the passenger seat and pulled the door shut. Drive, he said. His voice was a stranger's rasp. The driver, a young Haitian lieutenant named Danny Dread Baptiste, didn't ask questions. He pulled away from the curb, the engine a low purr beneath the jazz station playing softly on the radio. Coltrane, Nema, sad and blue. Leo stared at his hands. They were trembling. Not the fine tremor of adrenaline, but a deep, seismic shaking that started in his marrow. He pulled the gloves off with his teeth, stared at the pale, ink-stained fingers that knew the texture of vellum, the resistance of a rotring pen, the warmth of Maria's skin. I am an architect, he thought, the realization crashing over him with more force than the recoil. I build things. I do not unmake them. The car turned onto the Metropolitan Expressway, the elevated highway cutting a scar through the city's north end. The lights of Montreal blurred into streaks of gold and red and white. Leo leaned his forehead against the cold glass. I need to stop, he whispered. Pull over. Now, Danny flicked the hazard lights, guided the car onto the shoulder beneath the overpass. The highway roared above them, a river of indifference. The door opened before the car stopped. Leo stumbled out, fell to his knees in the gray slush at the edge of the pavement, and vomited. He retched until there was nothing left but bile and the ghost of the espresso he'd forced down at 6 a.m. The sound was obscene, wet and violent, tearing at his throat. He dry-heaved, spitting, tears freezing on his cheeks the moment they fell. A heavy wool blanket settled over his shoulders. Danny stood over him, a silhouette against the sodium glow, holding a thermos cup. Water, Danny said. His accent was thick, Montreal Nord Creole bleeding into French. Small sips. Don't swallow fast. Leo took the cup. His hands shook so badly the water sloshed over the rim, scalding his wrist. He drank, gasped, drank again. The blanket smelled of diesel and tobacco and something faintly floral. Fabric softener, maybe. Domestic. Human. He was a soldier, Danny said quietly, lighting a cigarette, cupping the flame against the wind. Montana's. He would have done the same to you. To Nick. To the old man. He did the same. You saw the photos from the church. Leo wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. The taste of copper and acid lingered. I know. I know the math. I know the list. Then why the sickness, Piccolo? Danny asked, using the nickname the crew had given Leo, little one, though he stood 6 feet tall. You knew the cost when you took the piece. Because math doesn't bleed, Leo whispered, staring at the steam rising from the vomit in the snow, a tiny, violent geyser melting a hole in the white. Math doesn't smell like burnt coffee and cheap cologne. Math doesn't have keys in its pocket for a Honda Civic with a cracked windshield. Danny exhaled a plume of smoke. No. Math doesn't. But Vito does. And Giulia. And the baby Maria carries. That's who you just saved. That's the architecture now, Leo. You build the wall. Brick by bloody brick, Leo looked up at him. The wind howled through the girders of the overpass. When does the wall get high enough, Danny? When do we stop laying bricks? Danny flicked the butt into the darkness. Ask me when the snow stops falling in July. Get in the car. The Signora is waiting. The gallery loose smelled of beeswax, old varnish, and the sharp, green scent of the white lilies Giulia insisted on keeping in the reception area, flown in weekly from a greenhouse in Holland regardless of cost. It was a sanctuary of silence and controlled light, a white cube dropped into the gray heart of Westmount, where the snow was cleared instantly by private contractors, and the streets hummed with the quiet arrogance of old money. Giulia Rizzuto stood before a massive canvas by a Cree artist, bands of crimson and ochre bleeding into raw canvas, titled The River Remembers. She wore a charcoal cashmere coat over a black silk blouse, her hair pulled back in a severe, elegant chignon. She looked, as always, like a woman who had never raised her voice, let alone fired a gun. But the set of her jaw, the tension in the fingers clasped behind her back, told a different story. The bell above the door chimed. Soft. Polite. Giulia did not turn. The gallery is closed for private viewing, Agent Rossi. The sign on the door is explicit. Elena Rossi stepped onto the polished concrete floor, her boots making no sound. She wore a charcoal wool trench coat, badge clipped to her belt beside her service weapon, standard RCMP issue, no attempt at plainclothes disguise. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe bun. The circles under her eyes were bruises painted by too many nights in surveillance vans and too few hours of sleep. She carried a leather briefcase that looked heavy enough to anchor a ship. "The sign says, by appointment only, Signora Rizzuto," Elena replied, her voice pitched low, respectful, devoid of the triumph Giulia had expected. "I made an appointment. With you. Yesterday. Through your lawyer," Giulia turned then. Her face was a mask of porcelain, eyes the color of the scent. "Lawrence in deep winter. My lawyer is currently negotiating a plea deal for a man who launders money through my conservation framing budget. I have no time for the RCMP's obsession with my husband's correspondence. This isn't about correspondence." Elena stopped 3 meters away. "The safe distance. The negotiation zone. It's about the International Prisoner Transfer Treaty. Bill C-52. The Convention on the Transfer of Sentenced Persons." The air in the gallery seemed to thicken. The Coltrane record playing softly from a hidden speaker, blue and green, Miles Davis now, warped slightly in the sudden pressure. "Vito has 12 years remaining on his U.S. sentence," Giulia said, her Italian accent curling the vowels. "He is an ADX Florence. The Alcatraz of the Rockies. He is not eligible for transfer. The Americans do not release their trophies. They do if the sending country agrees to enforce the sentence," Elena countered, opening the briefcase. She didn't pull a gun. She pulled a thick sheaf of documents, bound in red tape. "And if the receiving country, Canada, agrees to accept him. The Minister of Public Safety has discretion. The treaty allows it. It's been done before. Mafia bosses, drug kingpins. They serve their time in Kingston Pen or Archambault. Medium security. Family visits. Lawyer access. Espresso." Giulia's fingers twitched at her side. "The only tell. And the price. You don't walk into the lion's den with a stake around your neck unless you're feeding the beast." Elena placed the documents on a pristine white pedestal beside a sculpture of carved soapstone. "The price is the Montreal Plaza. The whole architecture. The ports, the construction bids, the heroin pipeline, the money laundering through the condo developments. You hand it to us on a silver platter. Wiretaps. Financial records. The names of every Ndrangheta cell leader in Ontario and Quebec. Sally Montana. Frankie Cotrani. The remnants of the West End gang leadership. Ray Deschamps if he doesn't retire first." She leaned forward, intense, desperate. "Vito comes home. He serves his time in Canada. He lives. You live. Leo lives. The baby lives. In exchange, the empire falls. Legitimately. Legally. No more snipers at funerals. No more car bombs on Sherbrooke. No more blood on the snow." Giulia stared at the documents. She didn't touch them. She looked past Elena, through the floor-to-ceiling windows, at the manicured lawns of Westmount buried under 3 feet of white. Somewhere out there, Leo was washing his hands in a safe house in Laval, scrubbing until the skin broke. Somewhere out there, Vito was reading Dante in a concrete box the size of a parking space, writing letters in lemon juice that only she could read. "The empire," Giulia said softly, "is not the ports. It is not the heroin. It is not the concrete or the steel or the cash in the Cayman Islands." She turned back to Elena, and for the first time, the mask cracked. Not into emotion, but into something harder. "Granite. The empire," Giulia said, "is a boy who draws bridges because he believes they can hold the weight of the world. It is a husband who wept when I gave him a sketch of a Caravaggio, because he knew the light was the only thing that could save him. It is a daughter-in-law who carries the next generation in her womb, while her lover kneels in a highway ditch vomiting up his soul. She took a step closer, invading Alina's space. The agent did not step back. You ask me to destroy my husband's life's work. Giulia's voice was a blade wrapped in velvet. His life's work is us. The rest is noise. The rest is the machinery he built to keep the wolves from the door while he built the sanctuary. You want the machinery, Agent Rossi. Take it. It's rusted. It's stained. It costs more in blood than it yields in gold. Alina blinked. The briefcase snapped shut in her hand. You'd surrender the plaza. The loyalty of the crews. The respect of the Calabrians. For a transfer that the Americans might block anyway. Massino's testimony is the linchpin of the RICO case. If Vito comes to Canada, the U.S. loses leverage. They'll fight it. Let them fight, Giulia said. Let them spend years in court arguing jurisdiction, while Vito breathes air that isn't recycled through a steel vent. Let him hold his grandson. Let him die in his own bed, if that is what God intends. I will trade every container at berth 37, every brick of the Turcotte interchange, every dollar in the numbered accounts for time. Do you understand? Time is the only currency that matters now. Alina looked at her, really looked, perhaps for the first time seeing not the mob wife, not the money launderer, but the general. The architect's true partner. You're a dangerous woman, Signora Rizzuto, Alina said quietly. More dangerous than Vito. He kills for power. You would burn the world for love. Giulia offered a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Vito kills for us. There is no difference. Now. Here is the pen. Sign the affidavit initiating the transfer request on humanitarian grounds, family unity, health deterioration. I will provide the financial ledgers for the last 5 years. The Montana-Cotrany Alliance communications. The Disjamp supply routes. Everything. But, she held up a finger. You leave Leo alone. The hit on Syra. The retaliation. You bury it. You lose the file. You tell your supervisors the trail went cold. Alina's jaw tightened. That's obstruction. Accessory after the fact. If they find out, they won't, Giulia interrupted. Because the only witness is a Haitian kid named Danny who owes his life to my husband, and a wife who knows how to burn a shirt in a gallery incinerator at 400 degrees Celsius. The forensics will show nothing. The ballistics will match a gun stolen from a police evidence locker in 2003. It's clean, Alina. Make it cleaner. Alina stared at the documents, then at Giulia. The gallery lights hummed. Miles Davis breathed a lonely trumpet line into the silence. My brother, Alina whispered, the words barely audible. The one your crew disappeared in '94. He loved jazz. Coltrane. A love supreme. He played sax badly in a garage band. He wanted to be a teacher. Giulia's expression softened, a microscopic shift. I know. Vito told me. He told me the name. Marco. He told me Marco had a laugh like a barking seal. He told me he died hard. He told me he was sorry. Not for the order. For the waste, Alina closed her eyes. A single tear tracked down her cheek, cutting a clean line through the fatigue. If I do this, if I sign, I'm not saving him. I'm witnessing you. Both of you. That's all I ever was. Then witness, Giulia said. And go home to your husband. Make dinner. Sleep in a bed without a wiretap. That is the only victory that lasts. Alina picked up the pen. A Montblanc, black resin, gold nib. Giulia's pen. She signed. Elena Rossi. RCMP. Liaison officer. The ink bled into the fibers, permanent and black. Giulia took the signed pages, slid them into a plain manila envelope. She didn't look at the financial ledgers she had prepared, thick binders sitting in the fireproof safe behind the office door. She didn't need to. She knew every number, every date, every lie written in black ink. Go, Giulia said. The snow is getting heavier. The roads will close by midnight. Elena nodded, picked up her briefcase. She paused at the door, hand on the cold brass handle. The transfer. It won't be fast. Bureaucracy. Politics. The Americans will scream. It could be months. A year. Then we wait, Giulia said, turning back to the canvas the river remembers. We have waited 25 years for a peace that lasted 6 months. We can wait a year for a peace that lasts forever. The door chimed. The cold rushed in, a physical blast, smelling of ozone and exhaust. Then the door closed. Silence returned, heavy and absolute. Giulia exhaled, a long, shuddering breath that fogged the air before her face. She reached into her coat pocket, pulled out a folded piece of paper, thin, translucent, the edges singed. A letter from Florence. Written in lemon juice, revealed by the heat of a light bulb in her bedroom 3 nights ago. My Giulia, the snow here is different. It does not fall, it attacks. It hits the slit window sideways like driven needles. I read of Nick's funeral. I read of the sniper. I have written 14 names. The paper dissolves in the toilet, but the names are carved into the wall behind the sink, scratched with the metal clip from a legal binder. 14. For my father. For my son. For the peace they broke. I am coming home. Not because the treaty works. Not because the Americans relent. But because you have made a path where none existed. You always do. Save the boy, Giulia. Save Leo from the list. That is my only order. V. Giulia pressed the paper to her lips. The ink tasted of iron and lemon and ash. 14 names, she whispered to the crimson bands on the canvas. 14 bricks. And then the wall is finished. She walked to the office, her heels silent on the concrete. She opened the safe, pulled out the heavy binders. She carried them to the incinerator in the conservation room, an industrial machine meant for destroying mold-damaged archival tissue. She fed them in, one by one. Ledger 2006. Ledger 2007. Montana wire logs. Cotrany medical fraud. Disjamps port manifests. The fire roared, a white-hot throat consuming the paper, turning the empire into gray ash that settled like snow on the metal grate. Outside, the city disappeared under the storm. Inside, the gallery burned clean. In the basement war room of Chateau Rizzuto, 17 kilometers north, the red light on the secure phone blinked once. Then again. Leo picked up the receiver. He had showered. He had changed. He wore a fresh black sweater, the same kind he wore to critique structural loads in Milan. His face was pale, the dark circles painted deep, but his eyes were dry. Clear. The tremor in his hands was gone, replaced by a stillness that terrified the men standing behind him, Danny, and 2 older soldiers from the Calabrian faction who had flipped when the wind changed. Pronto, Leo said. His voice was flat, devoid of the boy who drew bridges. A crackle of static. Then a voice, rough as gravel, transmitted through layers of encryption and distance. The list is done. 14 names. The first is crossed out. Syra. The second is Montana's driver. The third, stop, Leo said. Read them to me. All of them. Slowly, he pulled a notebook from his pocket. A Moleskine, the same kind he used for site measurements. He uncapped a fountain pen, black ink, fine nib. Architecture, he thought, the nib touching the cream paper. Load-bearing walls. Stress points. The mathematics of collapse. He began to write.